Good evening, everyone. I call to order the meeting of the Board of Education of the Ridge-Niles School District 64 for Thursday, November 12th, 2020. Carol, would you take roll, please?
Biaggi.
Here.
Pearl.
Here.
Sotos.
Here.
Dallas here. Little.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Riles.
Here.
Quorum present.
Great, thank you. The administration has asked us to go into closed session tonight under Section 2C10 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to discuss matters related to individual students. If we would maybe have a motion on that, and then we can see if there's any discussion before we go into closed.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Rebecca, I think you got that first, right? All right. So Larry made the motion and Rebecca's got the second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote then.
Dallas, yes. Biaggi.
Yes.
Little.
Yes.
Riles.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Sotos.
Yes.
Pearl.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. We will see everyone in closed. Thank you. Okay, the board is back from closed session where we were there under Section 2C10 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to discuss matters related to an individual student. And at this time, may I have a motion to convene a public hearing on the 2020 tax levy?
So moved.
Thanks, Rebecca. Is there a second?
Second.
I think Fred had the second. Okay, we'll take a roll call vote on convening the meeting.
Dallas, yes. Little.
Yes.
Pearl.
Yes.
Biaggi.
Yes.
Riles.
Yes.
Sotos.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that this is the 2020 tax levy hearing conducted by the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District number 64, Cook County, Illinois, pursuant to Section 23-140 of the School Code. For the record, the board approved the 2020 tax levy in tentative form on October 8th, 2020. On October 29th, 2020, notice of tonight's public hearing was published in the Park Ridge Herald Advocate. Notice of this hearing was also posted on the district's website. At this time, does the administration have any comments? Dr. Olson, anything? You're on mute.
Sorry, no.
That's okay. I saw you shaking your head.
Yeah.
Okay, and if no one else from the administration, then at this time, do the members of the board have any comments? Okay. Are there any comments from the public? Natasha, are there any comments that we've received related to the levy that should be read into the record?
None.
Okay, and Carol or Dr. Olson, are there any members of the public that are present at Roosevelt right now?
There are not.
Okay. You are at Roosevelt, right?
Correct.
Okay, just to make sure. I couldn't tell necessarily by your background at least. Okay, are there any more comments or clarifications from the administration or the board?
No.
May I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing on the 2020 tax levy and return to regular session?
So moved.
Thanks, Denise. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Tom. Denise has the motion. Tom has the second. Can we take a roll call vote, please?
Little.
Yes.
Biaggi.
Yes.
Sotos.
Yes.
Pearl.
Yes.
Dallas, yes. Sanchez.
Yes.
Riles.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thanks, Carol. Okay, so I think what we will do now, since the next part of the regular board meeting doesn't start until 7 o'clock, we'll adjourn for about 10 minutes, and then we'll reconvene at the 7 o'clock mark to begin again. Great. Well, welcome back, everyone. It is 7 o'clock. The board convened this evening at 6:30 p.m. To go into closed session under Section 2C10 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to discuss matters related to an individual student. And then we had the hearing on the 2020 tax levy at 6:45 p.m. That lasted all of about 3 minutes. And then we came back and closed that down. And now we're back in open session again to conduct the rest of our regular board meeting for this evening. So Carol, with that, can we take roll again?
Sure. Pearl,
Here.
Photos,
Here.
Biagi,
Here.
Salas here, Little,
Here.
Sanchez,
Here.
Riles,
Here.
quorum present still.
Thank you. So yesterday was a day in our country that we honor the women and men who have served our nation with dignity and with honor. We have a lot of veterans in Park Ridge that we owe a debt of gratitude to, and we have one of our favorite veterans, Command Sergeant Major Larry Riles, who was on our board, and I would ask if he would be kind enough to lead us in the pledge tonight.
Airborne. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your service to our country. Okay, I don't have any other opening remarks tonight. So with that, I think we'll go to the public comment section of the evening. I know I asked a little earlier, just so I kind of have a handle on things, Dr. Olson and Carol, is there anyone present in the room right now?
Nobody's present.
Okay, so I assume that also means there's no one present for public comment. And Natasha, I think you have maybe one or two emails that we've received.
I do. I have one.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes. Oh, you know what? I just realized, I just to go through the formality, we should do it even though no one's present. I'm going to do it anyway. So we are at the point of this meeting where we have public comment on non-agenda items. Each speaker is given 3 minutes to address the board. Comments may be made on almost any matter related to the operation of schools. Each person appearing before the board will be treated with courtesy and respect, and the board requests the same in return. In light of the privacy of personnel and student matters, commenters are strongly discouraged from speaking about individual staff or students during public comment. Commenters are instead encouraged to first raise concerns privately with the board president or administration. The board, however, recognizes each commenter's First Amendment rights. Thus, it will not prohibit commenters from speaking about individual staff or students, subject to well-recognized exceptions under the First Amendment, such as obscenity, threats, fighting words, or incitements to violence. And just as a reminder to the community, I know that no one's present at the moment at Roosevelt, but you're welcome to be present at Roosevelt tonight, where we have a few members of administration and one board member present. You can email questions in to the email address that is on the district's website. And we will take those comments either now during the public comment on non-agenda items section, or during each of our action items this evening. We will take a moment to turn to the public to see if there are any comments on particular action items we take. So sorry, Natasha, for getting you going and then
No, that's fine. I
stopping
had
there,
time
but
to get ready.
good. You're all set then.
Thank you. This comment is from Sonia Dzizik. Dear Board of Education, Administration, parents, and colleagues, my name is Sonia Dzizik, and I am a middle school elective teacher of District 64. I would like to voice my concerns and professional opinion regarding the recent administrative decision to profoundly and negatively alter the middle school elective program, as noted on Wednesday, October 28th, in an email from Dr. Olson below. I feel better options are available and have been proposed, yet have not been truly compared in terms of COVID safety, logistics, educational benefits, and financial impact. So begin Dr. Olson's quoted email. The second change is that after Thanksgiving break, we will bring our 7th and 8th graders back on site for a full day experience 2 to 3 days per week, just like everyone else. For trimester 2, we will continue to have students work in homeroom cohorts, limit their movement, and maintain social distancing. Students will participate in assigned encore classes as a homeroom. For scheduling purposes, some students may connect to an elective virtually. Your principal will share more information about this next week at your building meeting. Hopefully, we will be able to move toward a more typical schedule in trimester 3, which includes student choice as it has in the past, an important component of our program. End of Dr. Olson's quoted email. In addition, I want to state that while COVID metrics are in a moderate to high range of risk, I agree with a recent parent statement that expresses the following idea. This is a quote from a parent statement. Additionally, the increase to full day for 7 to 8 is welcome as well. However, since the lunch period and electives are more challenging to do in person, since most will be doing Zoom at desk, it seems to make more sense to consider doing a 4 or 5 day per week AM/PM situation for the 7th, 8th graders. That way they can do all of their core classes in person with their teachers and electives at home. I would appreciate you considering this option or sharing with the community why this was not chosen as an option. End of quoted statement. Finally, there have been alternative ideas offered to administration by staff for delivering the elective program in the current pandemic state. During remote/hybrid teacher committee meetings and in other attempted email dialogue with administration, ideas were seemingly rejected without study or comparison in terms of COVID safety, logistics, educational benefits, financial impact. For example, 1, under the current administrative proposal during moderate to high COVID risk, move the proposed cohort of students as a group to the elective classrooms and provide those teachers with the support to clean between classes. 2, if COVID metrics are in a low range of risk, block the elective classes like the core classes and allow students to move to only 2 elective classrooms per day. I am happy to participate in conversation and brainstorming around these ideas or others to study available options that will be best and appropriate in terms of COVID safety, logistics, educational benefits, financial impact. I sincerely hope the current administrative change in our elective program to a very limited forced choice program is not motivated by long-term administrative goals to substantially weaken the current middle school programming. I want to be clear that I understand the management rights of our administration and board as it pertains to programming. However, I feel that my professional voice and that of my colleagues who have expressed ideas is not being legitimately considered. Thank you for your time. Respectfully, Sonia Zidzik, our teacher, Emerson. Also signed in agreement by Terry Broker, music teacher, Emerson. End of public comment.
And that was it, Natasha, just the one that came in?
Yes, that was it.
Okay, great. And Dr. Olson, is there anyone else present that's come in since?
No.
Okay. All right. I neglected to mention this at the beginning of the meeting, but due to COVID-19, we've deemed that it's prudent to have this meeting remotely instead of in person, but we are following all guidelines identified by the state. Does any of the board have any changes, amendments, deletions, edits to the agenda as presented? Dr. Olson, are you okay if we not adjust one of the agenda items as you and I had discussed in light of the circumstances? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Any other thoughts from the board before we move on to the next issue? Okay. All right. Then I think we have some student and staff recognitions.
Yes. Thank you. Tonight, we recognize our technology department. While there are many groups of staff members who have contributed to the success of District 64 the past 6 months, tonight we want to recognize our technology department for all their efforts to instruct us, to help us navigate, and to problem solve with us as we've all had to adapt to a new way of life where technology as a tool is needed more than ever before. MJ and I have fallen into this pattern where whenever I call her, no matter how early in the morning or late at night, she usually doesn't answer, but I get a quick text telling me she's helping someone work through something and can she call me back in a few minutes. I'm actually more surprised when she does answer. Yet this goes again to what our technology department has become, round-the-clock support to keep remote learning functioning. But let's not forget about innovation. This too has become a readily used tool as we are facing challenges we've never faced. We're inventing new ways of doing things different than we've ever done them before, and the work never seems to stop. Thank you to our entire technology department for their tireless work and for their dedication to the students, staff, and families of District 64. I can say with all confidence, we couldn't have done this without you. Thank you. MJ?
Thanks. I am beyond proud to be leading this group of dedicated technology staff members. We have technologists, we have ITCs, we have library information specialists, and we have our Tech Central group. Before March 17th, the District 64 Technology Department was already a very important part of how teaching and learning happened in the classroom. And then once we found ourselves in a pandemic situation, the whole team rose to meet the challenges that enabled our district to pivot to a different way of learning as successfully as we did. So we're a lean group that did a great deal of heavy lifting in a very fast timeline. And I am extremely proud of how well we were able to respond and to serve our district, our students, our staff, our parents. And while we're reaching a new peak again, we are very conscientious of continuing the good fight to make things work and happen in District 64. So thank you, board. Thank you, community, for your continued support and appreciation. This actually gives us an energy boost as we brace ourselves for whatever is to come. So in my book, the District 64 Tech Department has been one of our essential workers, and even more so during these times. So thank you again for tonight's acknowledgement.
Thank you, MJ. Please extend our thanks to all of your staff and especially to you for your leadership with your crew. So thank you. Okay, I think you have one more thing. You can bypass that one if you want to, the next one, Eric.
No. You're not going to get away that easy. Thank you. We have some more recognition to go. So Sunday, November 15th, 2020 is Board Recognition Day. So I wanted to take a few moments tonight to thank our Board of Education for their service this past year. This year, of all years, has asked much more of you than any of us could have imagined. While many items have come across the board table this year, none was as large as the pandemic. Thank you for representing the community, for sharing all points of view with me to ensure I see the whole picture, for helping me reflect on how information is being given and received, and for the time and research you have done on your own to understand this dangerous virus. In general, I thank you both for your cooperation and for your ability to push each other to think deeper on a topic. I thank you for caring as much as you do for the people of this community, for always putting what's best for students first, and for how hard you work to understand the problems before us and seek to overcome them. Thank you both for your service as a group, but also as individual board members working towards the greater whole. Thank you for hanging in there, for modeling calm, thoughtful approaches to problem solving, and most of all, thank you for partnering with me to lead District 64 through this pandemic and into our future. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Olson.
You're welcome.
That was very, very nice. And to my fellow board members, it's an honor to serve with each of you. So we're going to move on to the next update that we have, which is the PT3 board update. So Dr. Olson, actually Dr. Frost, I'm not sure if you're going to tag team it, but however you want to lead that.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Dr. Frost.
Okay, thank you. I am happy to address the board tonight on the progress of PT3. Within the board packet, I have included a summary of the PT3 activities since its inception. I do know that we have both staff and parent perspectives to consider tonight, so I am going to keep my comments brief. PT3 has met twice this year and is scheduled to meet again on November 17th. Since May, our meetings have been virtual. At this time, PT3 is focused on the work of two subgroups, a parent education and a stakeholder communication group. The parent education subgroup is working on creating video vignettes for parents of students with special needs. They are starting with a What You Can Expect series, which will address the three most common types of IEP meetings, which are domain, initial, and annual reviews. These videos will delve into the purposes of each meeting, staff who are involved in these meetings, and a description of the activities associated with these meetings. The videos created will be posted on the Student Services webpage. The stakeholder communication subgroup is working on making alterations to the current district Student Services web pages. Additional information and materials will be added, as well as perhaps moving some items around and linking to other pages on the website. The idea is to create these web pages so that parents can easily access information about programs, services, and procedures. With both subgroups, we hope to complete the work in early spring. And once we are finished with the subgroup work, we will engage in a process like we did prior, in which we generated and presented to the group for discussion of what our next projects will be. I believe PT3 is addressing the needs of parents and moving in the right direction. The members that we have on PT3 are innovative and collaborative, and I am appreciative of the work the members are doing. At this time, I would like to have Mrs. Laudadio express her opinion and perspectives on PT3.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Laudadio, and my son, Jack, is a kindergartner at Washington. So I'm fairly new to this group. I only joined it last year when my son was identified at Jefferson for special ed services. So I didn't really have much history on special ed in District 64 or this committee at all before coming in. So I'm happy I'm a part of it now. And I'm a teacher myself, so I'm familiar with special ed services and procedures and offerings, but at a high school level. So I've had to work hard to put aside my educator hat and try and focus on what was being done from a parent perspective. And as I've gotten better at that, I really do believe that the committee has the best interest of students and families in mind. I know not every decision that committees like this make are popular decisions, but I do believe that the committee, the District 64 staff and administration have the best intentions for our kids and for our parents. Their decisions have been based on countless hours of work and research and thoughtful discussions. I'm proud of the work the committee accomplished last school year, even as the pandemic cut the year short. We all still met via Zoom and worked outside of that to accomplish what we wanted to, and I think we did a good job. And this year, we've already made great progress in helping connect parents to the district and the special ed community. I'm proud to know that the committee is focusing on parents and how they can feel supported. Having a child with special needs is difficult in a million different ways. And it's so nice that we are in a place where we're trying to help make some of that easier for not just the students, but for the parents as well.
Thank you. I'd also like to hear from Ms. Bublitz. Ms. Bublitz is our staff representative from PT3.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Bublitz. I teach at Carpenter in the instructional program. A few years ago when PT3 first started, it was something that I was really interested in. However, at that time, schedules didn't really work out. So I chose not to take that opportunity and honestly kind of forgot about PT3 until it came up again this year. As an instructional teacher, there's so many times where instructional teachers really sort of feel like we're on an island amongst ourselves. And with that being said, when this opportunity came up, I thought, what a great way to make connections with other teachers again, a great way to make connections with parents again, to maybe learn something new, push me out of my comfort zone, and just learn more about the district. And so I'm super new to this. I've only gone to 1.5 meetings, so pretty green with what PT3 was or is. So I'm on the stakeholder communication portion of PT3, and we researched a lot of the websites. We compared it to ours. As a teacher and being around for a while, I found out some new things about our website. And, you know, after you're here for many, many years, you don't really go back and look at your own website anymore. So that was kind of fun to be able to kind of see what is on our own website as far as special services go. And then to compare it to other districts and what can we put on there that will help parents access the information they need. I'm a huge advocate for our parents and for our kids. And so when I was able to look at some of these websites, there were a lot of aha moments that the entire team was saying, oh, we should probably add this. Now there's a lot of good stuff on our website too. And then I was thinking tonight as I was asked to talk, like I was thinking about why do I think this is important? Why PT3? Why do I want to be a part of it? Aside from making these connections and kind of being out there with the community and hopefully being able to offer something from experience and a teacher in District 64. And as we were going through all these websites and the amount of knowledge in these groups is huge and getting a parent perspective is so needed in this district. But I thought that what is most important? And to me, it came down to if we can make this website a little more user-friendly, if we can help parents access what they need to access, if it helps even just one parent familiarize themselves with special education in the process, if we can connect parents to trainings, or if we can reach out, or if they can reach out to a staff member and get the help they need for one child, everything that we do with this PT3 is worth it if we can just help one person gain this access. And that's really, to me, and probably to almost to other people in the group, that's what's important. We're here to help our parents, help our students, and be student and family centered. So right now I'm enjoying it. Like I said, I'm only 1.5 sessions in, but I look forward to what has come because there's a lot of great minds on this and it's really important work. So thank you.
Thank you. Before we get into questions from the board, one of the things I also wanted to do was share with you an update on one of the activities that we did accomplish at the end of last year and how we have implemented it for this year. And that's our Structured Learning Community Program, or what we call SLC. And as you can imagine, SLC has weathered a perfect storm. It's a new program. We battled with building construction and also with COVID. So, but through it all, we're doing very well. We have 7 students who are in person, and that program is on a daily basis, 5 days a week. The teacher and the teacher assistants have been in person since August, as has the social worker. The social worker only is assigned to the room for 2.5 days, however. We also have the coordinator who has been on site as well. And her background was with autism in the past. She was a behavior coach with NSSEO. So as you can imagine, her insight has been valuable. And then in October, we also added the in-person instruction from our speech and language therapist who comes in 2 days a week. In addition, we have had training with Have Dreams. They come in several times a month to work with our teacher and with our staff to ensure the techniques and strategies that we are employing with the students are done with fidelity. We have also had Angela Phillips, who's the assistant director, work with the team on crisis prevention. She generally meets with the team on Wednesday mornings prior to school starting to have some hands-on experience with the crisis prevention. We also have had virtual training with our board certified behavior analyst and as well as our assistive technology specialist. Our OT and PT also are available to us virtually as well. I will also say that yesterday, Washington staff had their first formal training on understanding autism. It was about a 45-minute session where they talked about characteristics of autism and how autism varies between different students. The program is progressing well, and we're continuing to expand the techniques and tools for student use. And as had been projected, we will be looking at expanding SLC for the future as well. So with that, are there any questions that the board has?
Just a comment, and I appreciate everything that you're doing and that PT3 is doing. But as you know, I talk about this often about the education of the gen ed students about special ed. And I've worked with a group in years past that developed a film to show to third, fourth, fifth graders about autism, about Down syndrome, and other specialties. So I realize it's hard to do during COVID, but keep it in the back of your mind and kind of keep it in the conversation with PT3. I would appreciate it.
Certainly.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Or Dr. Sorry, go ahead, Denise.
That's okay. Dr. Frost, just glad to see that the committee's work, there's going to be tangible outcomes with the vignettes and the website. I think that'll be great to see as then the committee moves on to whatever the next direction might be. So I always think, having some deliverables is a great sign of progress. So thank you.
Anyone else from the board or administration who has anything else to add?
Well, I just wanted to thank our parent and teacher representatives tonight. You spoke extremely well, and we're very passionate, and we're certainly glad that you two are on the committee as well, because you certainly have your heart in the right place, and you are certainly motivated to certainly look to how we can make things better for students and families overall.
Agreed. Thank you on behalf of the board. Thank you both for serving. Okay, Dr. Frost, thank you for putting the presentation together tonight. All right, we're going to move on to our next point, which, as we all know in the community, an announcement came from the district last night. So while this was on the agenda prior to yesterday, this point becomes a little more important this evening. So Dr. Olson, do you want to give us an update on in-person?
Yes. So just as a reminder on some pieces that we already know, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, is that the district is going to take an adaptive pause as of this weekend, which means that we're taking a timeout from in-person learning. When we do that, we have to be closed for a minimum of 2 weeks. So what we're seeing is that next week, we will not have any students or staff attend except those necessary to keep the building functioning. And then the week of Thanksgiving break, the same thing. So having completed those 2 weeks, we could technically return to in-person learning following Thanksgiving break if the numbers allowed us to do so. In looking ahead, we are questioning whether the numbers would indeed be lower or, perchance higher at that time. And also, we're catching up to a couple of the announcements that have come out the last couple days. Yesterday from the Illinois Department of Public Health and today from the governor with their recommendations for businesses to close unless there's absolutely necessary to stay open. So we take those pieces into account. We're also taking the pieces into account of what's going to happen over Thanksgiving. There is the potential that a lot of our staff and students could potentially travel to other states in which the Illinois Department of Public Health is recommending a 2-week quarantine when they return. So it's possible that we may have both students and staff that would need to quarantine at that time. As you've seen, some other districts have made the decision to close between Thanksgiving break and Martin Luther King, which would allow the quarantine period to complete after the Thanksgiving break, and the same would happen after the winter break. So we are still talking through those conversations, and one of the key ingredients to those discussions is that if we are going to go to stay in full remote, then is it possible for us to bring some of our special education students in for in-person learning still? So Leanne has set up opportunities with staff. She's gathering staff input so that we can make a decision by early next week and share that with the community. Then I also wanted to let the board know that we have formed the Pandemic Advisory Committee. They are going to be meeting twice in December, and we have those dates settled and are ready to move forward on that. As a reminder, that committee is made up of parents, staff, and administrators, all working together around the idea of what's happening with the pandemic and what advice that they could give to us as we continue to talk through these situations and make decisions going forward during this year. And then lastly, I would just share that another benefit that we've seen by going Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday is that when we have a student or a staff member that tests positive, in most cases, we only have to quarantine half the class, because if that group was there on Thursday and Friday, we might have to do that group, but we don't have to go all the way back to the Monday, Tuesday group and do them. Whereas if we had everybody coming in the morning and then a different group coming in the afternoon, you would still need to quarantine the entire class. So we believe that in this model, what's also been beneficial is we've been allowed to keep more students in school and allow them to be there longer instead of having to quarantine as many that we possibly could have. We are able to move back into full remote very seamlessly. So our teachers will be able to do that this weekend and be able to teach effectively next week. And if we need to continue past Thanksgiving break, then they will be prepared to do the same. Those are my updates for now.
Does the board have any questions for Dr. Olson? I know we're not voting on anything with respect to this, but any questions for Dr. Olson on the in-person learning? Okay, I'm just going to offer it up right now. Is there anyone present, Dr. Olson at Roosevelt, that has questions on this issue?
No.
Okay, and Natasha, anything that's come in? I know this isn't an action item, but I'm doing it anyway.
No, we have
nothing
not
that's come in?
received any comment. No, nothing.
Okay, so no comments. Okay. All right, thank you, Dr. Olson.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is a discussion of a potential abatement of the 2020 debt service levy. So Luann, you want to take it away?
Thank you, Rick. I also wanted to introduce Anjali Vij, who's a partner from Chapman and Cutler Law Firm. She has joined us so she can answer any questions the board has, since this will be a first time for the board.
Wait a second. I think, Luann, we have too many lawyers present right now. I think we need to cancel the meeting. Sorry. Just kidding.
Tony said he volunteered to leave, I think.
I second that, Rick.
He's out of here. Okay. Yeah, it's one too many. So last month, remember at our board meeting on October 8th, I had discussed with you briefly the option of abating the debt service tax levy for 2020. This would provide a little bit of relief to our taxpayers, and it would not affect our future tax levies because it's only in the debt service fund. So a little bit of background on these bonds. They were issued in February 2014. The board at that time issued $7.9 million in general obligation limited tax school bonds, referred to as 2014 A bonds. And they were issued to repair and do maintenance work at Field Elementary School. And we actually had funds that we were able to use on other buildings, which was great. And the final payment on the bonds coming due next year of $350,200 will be due, and that would come out of the 2020 tax levy. Currently, our debt service fund, we've accumulated after our December payments, which are coming up, 2.1 million in interest income and lost in cost income. I'm recommending this because given the situation in the world and the community, it does provide a little bit of relief. It's about $72 on a home valued at 400,000. So it would go up and down dependent on the value of the home. Anjali has recommended or counseled that we have our district auditors look at what's remaining in there to determine what of those funds are interest income and what of those funds are lost and cost income. If it's interest income, the board could choose to move those funds to another fund within the district legally. However, if it's lost in cost income, because that was done through the tax levy process, it would need to stay in the debt service levy and could be used when the board issues additional bonds in the future.
Wayne, can I interrupt you for 1 second, just so you can give some context to the board and the public?
Sure.
What was it, maybe 2 years ago now? The prior board kind of shifted gears a little bit on how we were going to handle loss and cost, and you know how how we were going to adjust those percentages year to year based on what we had in the fund. Can you just give again the board and the public some context on that?
Sure. What we had done is we had looked at the board policy and had adopted a new policy in which the board could look at this on a year-to-year basis. In your debt service fund, the lost and cost is 5%. That's tacked on to the tax levy, and that can be a significant amount of money depending on how large your tax levy is that year. The 5% is done because the county clerk's office wants to make sure that we have enough money to make the bond payments. That's very important. So how they're looking at it is that you have no money in your savings account. And if you don't get the tax levy, you're not going to be able to make the bond payment. So they put the 5% on top of that, trying to guarantee that a district would receive 100%.
So, and again, just for clarification, so the lost in cost is supposed to make up for a percentage of the population, of the tax-paying population that doesn't pay their tax bills.
That is correct. And the lost in cost is the highest on the debt service fund because they want to make sure you have the money.
Right. So, and so there's a default number from the county for the lost in cost, but every taxing body has the ability to take less than that, or not more than that, right? But they can take less than that.
You could do some percentage, and correct me if I say something wrong, Anjali.
No.
That would be less than the 5%. But over the last, I think it's 2 years, Rick, we have looked at that number, and the board has chosen to not take the lost in cost. So we have not taken that over the last 2 years.
Right. And that's because, Luann, can you give the numbers just roughly of in Park Ridge, in our taxing district, what's the percentage of non-deadbeat, taxpayers?
So I even went back, Rick, and looked in the late 2000s when we had the housing crisis, just to kind of look and see as I was looking at our financial projections for this year. And we have well over 99% collection rate in our town, which is awesome. So just for the new board members or newer board members, I keep calling you guys new board members, but you're old board members now. That when the prior board had that conversation, there was that give and take of, well, the county's saying you can take 5%, but if our actual number in Park Ridge might be different in Berwyn or in Cicero or something, but in Park Ridge it is 99%, then we're only realizing a 1% lost in cost actual number, yet we're tacking on an additional 5% onto everybody's tax bill, and that seemed out of sorts. And I know there are other taxing bodies in town that have looked at it on a sliding scale and gone year to year and adjusted it
you know, from year to like taking a look at its last maybe 5-year average of where lost and cost came in, and then adjusting it year to year. This board decided to do something slightly different than that, kind of that way, but slightly different, in order to make sure that we still weren't in a pickle with respect to our fund balances.
Right, because we've looked at it on a year-to-year basis. So every year we have looked at that in October to see where we are. And because we have money in the debt service fund, if for some reason the collections came in lower and we didn't take the lost and cost, we had the money, you know, significant funds to make the bond payment. So does anyone have questions on the lost and cost, or how that's going to work in terms of the remaining funds for Anjali while we have her here? You're all ready for the test?
Yeah, I was going to say, Anjali, we might have brought you here tonight with no questions. How about that?
That's okay. You guys are an easy crowd.
I don't know about that. That's giving a lot of credit to us, but I don't know.
Any questions on the abatement or concerns? Because I have included the resolution that Anjali had put together, which I would bring back next month to the board. The format of the resolution is one that you've seen on other types of documents that we have. But I would like to bring this back for the board to adopt next month when they adopt the tax levy.
So Luann, do we have to go through some different type of process other than just to have a vote at the next meeting, or there's not a special hearing or anything we have to do like we did for the levy earlier today?
No,
I was just going to ask what the process is. Like, how is this all going to play out?
Okay, I'll let Anjali kind of explain the process.
There we go. Now you can earn your billable hours.
There you go. There you go. Well, so it is a very simple process. It is a little bit different than your operating levies. The board would simply pass the abatement resolution at the next meeting. That resolution gets filed with the county clerk, and that's their notification to take the taxes off of the books. So there is no special hearing or no notice that's required, especially because you're taking taxes off the books as opposed to putting them on. So it is as simple as passing the resolution and making sure it's filed with the county clerk.
Okay. So, I mean, I think from the board's perspective, now's probably the time to at least discuss this. And, you know, if anyone's got concerns with the proposal that's been proposed from the administration, we should probably talk about it tonight, because the administration is going to bring it back at the next meeting with a recommendation to adopt that and with a you know, an action item for us to vote on. Obviously, we can debate it again then, but it might be helpful just to get a straw poll of the board of where we are right now with this. So any thoughts from anyone? I'm taking the silence as acquiescence that everybody's good with with the proposal, Luann.
Is this the same board?
I don't, you know, I think everybody's been subbed out tonight. I don't know. It was, yeah,
So
something happened.
if we're choosing to move the interest income, is that what will we be voting on that in December?
No, not the interest income. We still need to work with our auditors so they can certify the amounts. Val and
How long would you, I was just wondering how long that takes for you to determine what portion is which.
Well, it'll depend on the auditors, because they're like running way behind right now. We just found out that we will have our audit in time for the December meeting, but they are running behind. So sometime next year, Val and I will start working on it, but I really want them to certify, and I think that would be necessary, wouldn't it, Anjali?
I think it would be in the best interest of the board to have that type of certification before moving the funds.
Actually, I have a question that actually came up in my mind. If we did not move any of the money and say the board would decide they wanted to issue a small bond for, say, construction, could they do it with the money in there, or do they have to actually issue other bonds also?
So you would issue a bond for a lawful school purpose. It could be a life safety bond. It could be a working cash fund bond. And then instead of levying taxes to pay the debt service on those bonds, you would use the money that's pledged in your bond and interest fund instead to pay the debt service on the bonds. And so all of that would be disclosed to the prospective purchaser of your bond issue. So you would issue a bond in the normal course. You just wouldn't put a levy on file to pay it since you have the funds on hand.
And would that be something you pay back in one payment, or would they be looking for multiple years of payments?
You know, typically when we see this done, it's a very short maturity. So typically it's one payment. Districts often will issue, you know, a bond for 30 days or even, you know, 1 month or 2 months, just effectively to move that money out. And if you issue a short-term bond, then you're lessening the interest that you're paying on that bond issue. So typically in this type of situation, we see a very short-term bond issue.
And any of the money that would be left if the board chose to move the interest costs out, that lost in cost money could be used in the same manner, either to issue a short-term bond or to use it if they were issuing a much larger size bond.
Correct. If you were issuing a larger sized bond issue, you would use the money in your bond fund, again, attributable to the loss and cost factor. You would use just that portion to pay debt service, and then you would levy for the rest of it, for example. So you would use your bond and interest fund money for the first payment.
Any other questions from the board?
This is a good situation to be in.
Yep, very good. All right, so Luann, you're going to bring it back to us in December for a vote.
Yes.
I would say if the board's got any additional questions, maybe after this meeting, you direct them to Dr. Olson and Luann, you know, in the interim, and then we'll bring it back for a vote in December.
Okay.
Anjali,
it will be a separate item from the tax levy, so it will be
Yeah.
its own item on the agenda.
Yep, separate. Anjali, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks,
all right,
Anjali.
you too.
Bye.
All right, thanks, Luann.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to our next agenda item, which is the staffing agreements issue. And I know there was a little bit of a audible made before the meeting with respect to at least one of the agreements, but I'll let, I'm guessing it's Dr. Olson and Dr. Martin talk about this.
Yeah, so first of all, good evening to everybody. I want to talk a little bit, give a little background on where we are with substitutes and why we're looking at bringing forward agreements with several companies. And so I'd like to just begin by talking about what we have in a typical year and what that looks like and what is the comparison to what the issues we're having this year. So in a typical year, the district has anywhere from about 150 to 175 subs in our pool, but that number is a little misleading. And we have a number of subs that will only work in certain grade levels, they will only work at certain buildings, and they will only work on certain days. So that doesn't mean on any given day I have 150 or 175 subs at my disposal, but last year, we filled on about a 97% fill rate. And if we had days that were 70, 80, 90, and even up to 100 staff members we needed to fill, we could generally get very close to filling at 100%. And I'll give some statistics here in a little bit. But what we have seen in this current year is that number has significantly been impacted by a number of things. First and foremost, as you would expect, is COVID. This year, when we put out a kind of email on who wanted to get trained on the new programs of Schoology and Seesaw, who wanted to be, who could come and sub, the total number that we have is under 100. It's 88 people who stepped forward. We've been out advertising, trying to get additional people, but I feel like for every person we add, we lose one. So on any given day, there's about 90 people we can try to call to see if they're available to sub, but we have the exact same issues that we've had in previous years. Some of those people will only work certain grade levels. Some will only work on certain days. Some will only work at certain buildings. So that 90 number really isn't representative of what's available on a daily basis. So like today or yesterday or tomorrow, what we're finding is that real number is somewhere around 50. And that doesn't cover what our needs are. So to give a little statistics, and I know one of the board members reached out, and so I'm going to break it down by week and by month a little bit. And I'm going to use apples to apples. I'm going to look at months from last year versus this year. So in September of last year in let me start over. In September of 2019, for the entire month, we needed to fill 1,093 positions. Now that's all encompassing. That's everything we needed to fill. We filled 1,057 of them and left 36 unfilled, or a 97% fill rate for the entire month. This year, we only had to fill, because of remote learning, 313. We filled 306, or 7 unfilled, at a 98% rate. So September was a good month. We were sitting feeling pretty good. However, we moved into October and things started to change. And what changed? A number of things. First of all, we go back to hybrid, and I don't mean that as a bad thing. Hybrid kids being in school, that's not a bad thing. But what we found is now we have some teachers who can't come to work because of medical things, and they're teaching remotely. So we're using a number of our subs as in person in the classrooms on a daily basis. They're being booked in those classes. We also have lessened that pool. So when somebody else goes out, now the people who can fill those is even smaller amount. So in the month of October of this year, we found that our fill rate was 91%. We went from 98 to 91. We're still doing okay. But November hits and things really start to fall off. We have found that we're at an 87% fill rate. This month already, we have 76 unfilled jobs. Last year at this same point, we had almost 900 positions to fill, and we filled all but 27 of them, or at a 97% clip. So if you think about it, there's 2 to 3 positions on a day at a building where we are having to scramble to fill. And how are we filling those? We're filling those with teachers internally covering during their plan times. We're covering those with building administrators, district administrators, curriculum specialists. These are the people who are filling these jobs. We've had a number of our building administrators who are scrambled, and they're taking these along with a number of their staff members. A number of Lori Lopez's department has really stepped forward, and they filled a number of them. So we're really kind of plugging the holes, and what we're seeing as this number is continuing to grow and our percentage to be able to fill is getting less and less. And what's also playing a factor in that, not only are we eating up a number of our subs that we are dedicating to certain teachers because they're working remotely, which is okay, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but our subs are also getting sick. Some of them have been exposed to COVID outside of the schools, not in. And they're calling us up and saying, hey, I was exposed, my husband was exposed, something happened, I can't sub anymore. So additionally, that pool just keeps getting smaller and smaller. And as we head into the, not only the, what seems to be spikes in COVID, but the typical cold and flu season, we're starting to see our numbers of subs or teachers and staff members going out starting to increase again. And our fill rate just keeps trending in the wrong direction. So what we are looking to do is add these companies who cannot, who would support and work parallel with our current sub system. We don't want to get rid of our subs. None of these companies want to come in and tell us, hey, you have to take us, it's an all or nothing. It's keeping our current subs in place. It's looking to fill as many of our positions with our own people as possible. But when we're not able to do that, to then work with these other outside companies to help fill the holes. And that's our goal. The good thing about the sub companies and these agreements that we're working on is that we only get billed for subs we use. So if we don't use anybody tomorrow, for example, we don't have to pay anything. If we didn't use any of their subs for the remainder of the year, we don't pay anything. We can opt out of the agreements at any time with no cost. And And these subs, just like our people, go through the same background, criminal background. They go through all the same paperwork that we have to do. They have to go through training before they set foot in our buildings. And we have the right, just like with our current subs, if there were to be an issue to dismiss somebody on the spot. But one of the things that I think all of us are concerned about as we head into the remainder of this 2021 school year is that, at least for the immediate future, things seem to be getting a little more bleak as far as the number of cases of people getting sick. And with that, we just continue to look at what's going on in the building, and we're going to need more people. And so we're looking to add these two companies as possible groups to work parallel with us to fill the holes on a daily basis. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any and all questions about this and move forward.
Joel, I've got a quick question about just conceptually how these companies work. So they don't like assign a person to a particular region or even a district and say like, okay, we've got these 10 subs that we're gonna make available to District 64 and only to District 64, right? Like, so for instance, Teacher X could tomorrow work in Park Ridge, the next day work in Naperville, the next day work in LaGrange, and the next day work in Cicero, right?
Possibly, yes. However, Rick, to your point, let's say that one of the things that's advantageous to not only them, but to us is really to be, looking ahead and seeing what we need. So for example, let's say that we had something coming up and that we knew we were going to need 5 or 6 additional people at a building or a district-wide because of something for a week. We can book them in advance and get the exact same people. We also have the ability with these companies, as we do with our own substitutes, to identify favorites that have done really well and to earmark them as people that are preferred for District 64.
Okay, and that's, I'm great. I'm glad to hear that. I was actually thinking about it from a health perspective. And, you hear all the time that, like for instance, with the sports teams, the teams that did get to play, for instance, at Maine South, they were extremely limited in their ability to travel. And so they were trying to restrict basically their reach outside of a very, close up area. And my point simply is that, so you could have a teacher today in Park Ridge, the next day in LaGrange, the next day in Naperville, the next day in Cicero, and be exposed to COVID potentially in a variety of different regions around the area. And then on the 5th day, come back to Park Ridge, having made the circuit of, 5 different suburbs in a week.
Yeah, you're right. That is a possibility.
Okay. Again, not that couldn't happen with our own subs, because in theory, our own subs could do the same thing, right?
Yeah,
they could work it.
We do have a number of subs that we share, meaning they do work within multiple districts, Evanston, Des Plaines, and some of our other surrounding districts.
Right.
I have a question, and I appreciate you answered all of my questions earlier today, except something that I thought about. If we have a sub that comes from this contractor that we really like, are we in any conflict if we try to hire this person?
Yeah, so it's yes and no. And what I mean by that, Larry, is the 2 different companies we're looking at have 2 different stances on that. Most of them have a clause that if you wanted to hire somebody permanently, there is a fee for that. The fee, depending on the company, can be a percentage of what their salary is or a flat rate. One of the companies is much more flexible in the fact of identifying, trying to minimize that cost, because that what they have found, or at least in their conversations with us, is the more they say no to people, hey, that we really like somebody, we want to hire somebody, that they find the more the districts are turned away from those people, the more likely they are to start looking at other companies. But yeah, there is a fee if you want to hire them permanently from the company.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Joel, what do we pay our subs?
Yeah, we pay our subs $120 a day if you sub for a teacher or TA. The same if you do a long-term position, which means you're in for a teacher for more than 15 days, you get paid $265 a day. Now, in those long-term positions, Denise, you are assuming all the responsibilities for a teacher. And so that's why we, pay you significantly more. But if you just come and you're working, as we said, if I was at Carpenter and I did one teacher today, I was at Roosevelt tomorrow, it's $120 a day.
So I guess I wonder, how does that compare to what these subs get paid through the third party? And is there like I'm a sub and I get paid $120 through the district, but then if I work through the organization, I get paid, I don't know, is it less or more?
They look to match the rates because the fear is if obviously we're paying ours higher, then people are going to quit for them and come jump ship for us. Where they make their money, obviously, is they're charging a % per sub of a higher rate for finding these people. But the rate that the actual employee makes would be the same.
Okay. Okay. And then do we have any permanent subs, meaning like you're a sub, we're going to hire you every day of the school year? And like the person goes into knowing that. Yeah.
So we don't hire for every day of the year. What we will do, there's 3 kind of categories that I would say. We have subs that are go-to that we work almost every single day. And a lot of times they are booked on weeks or months at a time, but they're usually not booked for an entire year. And the same with many of our long-term subs. We have a lot of long-term subs who will do 2 or 3 of those through the course of a school year. And we may book somebody for one and then in the middle of the next one, book them for the next one, so to speak, but we don't ever just book them for the entire year.
And just to add to that, Denise, if they're truly a sub, just on a sub certificate, they are limited to the amount of days they can work in a school year. They could not work a full school year. And then in the alternative districts that do that, if you're going to hire an actually certified teacher to play that role, you do have to pay them in accordance with your salary schedule within the PREA agreement.
Okay, no, that's a good point. Thank you. And then how about Joel, are there other, like any of our districts in the area who are using either of these companies?
So not in our surrounding. Swing is being used a lot in the southern suburbs, south and southwest more in particular, where they're struggling even more than we are to find subs. The other one, Parallel, has been used in some of the bigger districts. Out of state, actually, they're more popular, but they've done in Indianapolis. They work with a number of the archdiocese schools in the city, a number of the charter schools. They do have a couple more, again, private down in the south suburbs. But I have had, it's funny that you say that, there's been a lot of inquiry on Swing and some of these others now, as many of us who have not had the big, I shouldn't say, as big an issue with substitutes are all now starting to look at these additional companies.
Joel, I had a question, and maybe Tony kind of touched upon it when he talked about the number of hours these teachers are limited or days are limited. Is there a threshold by which a substitute works, so many hours or so many days for a district and they become eligible for TRS? Or are they automatically ineligible for TRS? Is that...
Not if they're working for a staffing firm, because they're actually employed by a private company.
Okay.
They don't pay to TRS. But if we were to hire them directly and they are professional educators, we do pay into TRS for those folks.
Okay.
So one of my questions relates to that. Paragraph 4 of the amendment does mention pension reportability and the possible negotiation of changes to the fees. So that's one change that could be contemplated by this amendment. And then paragraph 2 of the amendment, the term, it says it shall terminate on June 30th, 2021, sorry, but it may be extended upon their mutual written consent. So that's one of the issues, is we're approving this, or possibly approving this contract with these provisions that it may be extended, and it seems like it could be extended without board action. And then this pension reportability issue, which, I mean, I don't know how much of a change in the fees that would be, but that would be something that would be good to know. And then the other question I had was the effective date. Is there any reason that the effective date is October 15th?
No, I think that was the initially when we had sent it, and started the official paperwork back and forth. But it can easily be changed to me, or Carol, sorry. And I'm sorry, on the other one, the pension reportability, I'd have to look more into that on the terms. We could definitely look at doing that. And at the end of the year, I think the initial thought was if we ended up in a situation similar next year, as in there was no vaccine and we were in similar things, to have things in place at the start of the year, but we could easily have that end and renegotiate or set up for the start of the next school year if we were in that same situation.
Tony, wouldn't paragraph 2 require board action for a renewal of the contract? Because the parties would have to come to a meeting of the minds and then they'd have to come back to the board for renewal of the contract, right?
Yes, that'd be my opinion. You're looking at the parallel employment group. Is that the one we're looking at?
Yeah, that's the only one we have.
Right.
Oh, okay,
So,
okay.
yeah.
Got it.
Yep.
Yes, I agree.
Right, that was my issue with 2 and 4, just so that those 2 things go back to the board.
So but your issue is addressed with what Tony just said on 2, right, Carol?
Correct.
Okay, so now the only issue is 4. The portability issue, reportability issue, sorry.
Pension reportability issue? What? And
The negotiation of the changes in fees, but if that goes back to the board, that's fine.
yes, okay.
Okay, got it. Okay. All right, so if we've got more questions, we can keep going on questions. If we're going to have more of a debate, amongst the board on whether or not to do this, let's do that under a motion. So are there other questions for, that we want to get answered first before going into that?
Just a quick, I think we're looking at this for this year, that we certainly have a need with the pandemic and what's happening. But it seems like at some point there's a broader issue that we may need to contend with teacher shortages and, what are we doing more globally? I know this is the need right now, but it seems like at some point there might be the need to look at a broader picture.
Yeah, I would say, Denise, to your point, and we'll have a little better picture, as we head into the staffing, but I could bore you with some statistics of how many people are not going into the teacher profession. The decline over the last decade, significant. And not only the number of people not going into the profession, but the number of people who enter as freshmen but don't graduate is expanding, meaning in the wrong way, that they're changing their careers or their career trajectories while they're in college. So that number gets cut even more significantly. So the number of people graduating is very small, and Illinois has typically been a pretty big teacher producer in the Midwest, and it has been decimated. My alma mater, ISU, which is a teacher college, has been dramatically hit. On top of that, one of the other issues that we have in the Midwest is a lot of the teachers that are graduating are not staying in the Midwest. And I can talk to, the statistics say that there's pension crisis in Illinois. The weather is a huge factor for young people now. They're looking at the fact of, why would I stay here when I can go to Arizona or, California, Florida, wherever the case may be. And what you're finding is the number of teachers that are graduating and staying in the state of Illinois has been significantly impacted and is decreasing over the last 10 years. And there's a lot of statistics on that. We happen to be, for a couple of factors, we happen to be in a pretty good spot. We have a great reputation. We pay a good rate for our teachers, has all been kept us in a pretty good spot. But your point, Denise, all of us are starting to be impacted by that. And in particular, we've seen the hit with our specials. And that is one of the bigger areas coming in from the universities, where people think, hey, it's the elementary teachers. No, it's the number of people who are going into the special subjects in particular that has been decimated. And that's where I've seen the greatest impact as far as applicants. And it's why more and more we're all looking more out of state and trying to reach into other areas to try to attract. But it's becoming definitely more challenging than it has in the past. But at this point, yeah, we're going to have to start looking at and looking to try to do other things.
I don't think the education system is unique in that sense, Joel. I think everybody is experiencing. There's a mass exodus in Illinois of people leaving the state for obvious reasons. Yeah. And, that a lot of industries are being hit with being able to find talent in Illinois. Right. So somebody else was going to say something. I think I may have interrupted.
Yeah, so Joel, you mentioned that that was your plan, is to possibly do other things to recruit more people. So is that what your plan would be? Let's say this agreement were not approved tonight. Would you just continue to increase your efforts to find these subs?
Yeah, we've been trying to find people in different venues and going out to different areas that we haven't in the past looked for. Some of the other more non-education job posting sites, for example, we've started posting, even on more of the social media type things in the past that we didn't have to do. It's a way to try to attract different people and try to get the word out. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have, Carol, is a lot of the subs that we get at this point are people who kids are in our school districts, or are people who are looking to do this only a day or two a week because of, they're not viewing this so much as a primary source of income, but just kind of as a secondary or third, so to speak. And what I think we would like to try to do is try to continue to expand to attract people who can work more than 1 or 2 days a week. Because what we have found is, in the past, if you've got enough of those people, you can kind of patch things together. But it's becoming harder and harder. And when you get only people who will, I'm only going to work Tuesdays and Thursdays, because a lot of people don't want to work Mondays and Fridays, it really makes those fills difficult. So yes, even if we go with these groups, Carol, we're going to continue to try to reach out and get more people. And we're going to try to do different avenues, as we've talked about, just because I don't think, even when we start to go back to normal times, I still think, because of a lot of things that we've mentioned, that our sub pools are never going to go back to the numbers they were.
Joel, it's interesting that you mentioned many of the subs have children in the district. And I don't know if our parent community is aware how much of a struggle we are having with subs. And so, how do we just let that, maybe through this meeting or somehow let that out? I don't know if parents even realize what a challenge this has been.
Yeah, we'll try to get that word out even better, Denise.
Thanks, Denise.
All right. Well, we can continue to ask questions even after the motion's made. So why don't we take a motion right now on this, if someone wants to make that, and if it's seconded, then we'll go into discussion. Anyone?
All right. I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the agreement with Parallel Employment Group as amended.
Second.
Thanks, Denise. Had the motion, Fred had the second. So we're in discussion now on this. Is there any, I know we've asked a lot of questions already and kind of sort of had a little discussion, but is there any points anyone wants to make? Any discussion on it itself? Any other questions we have for administration? And Joel, to your point, I guess earlier, I had read through the contract earlier today, and I saw obviously that there was no exclusivity in there. So there was neither a situation that said it was like, as you said, there's an all or nothing. You can't hire any of your own subs. You have to hire ours. There was also, at least in this contract, no exclusivity with respect to using, if we wanted to use 10 other staffing companies, we're permitted to use 10 other staffing companies. I assume that to the extent there are other staffing organizations like this around, they all kind of operate the same. They're not going to expect exclusivity with one another.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. And is it typical then for most of the districts to, have 5 or 6 of these, or however many of them on their Rolodex, to ready to dial up?
I think a lot of or at least some of the districts that I've spoke to have worked with a couple of the companies in the past, have only needed one as kind of that extra support.
Yep.
But they are beginning to do what we're doing, which is to look at multiple groups who can support their needs.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the board?
So you guys feel that this is the best course of action at this time? administration.
Yes, I think going out and finding a third party who can help support when we can't get enough people to fill, like I said, our first choice is obviously to use our own. But I think on what we're finding again, Tom, is that we're struggling with that. So I think going out and looking at a third party who can help us at this immediate time because of the crisis we're in, I do think is the best route to go.
Agreed.
You know, and I was just thinking, Joel, about, you know, if we decide to approve this, I think communicating with our current subs that they're not going to be impacted. We want to keep you know, just to make sure we're not, you know, if I'm a sub and I hear that this third party is hiring subs, I'm like, what's going to happen to me? So I just think we need to make sure we communicate that so they don't feel that their jobs are threatened or we're, you know, trying to move away from hiring our own.
Right. Absolutely agree, Denise.
And I think you've been working really hard. So if this can give a little support to you and alleviate some of your stress, that would be helpful.
Well, and I would just say this, and I'll take 2 seconds to do my Academy Award speeches where I thank people. But I really want to thank, like I said, the individuals in Lori Lopez's curriculum team who have just given of themselves and been so flexible. The building administrators who, along with their secretaries who are figuring all these holes out, and all the other central office administrators who've gone and helped out and covered things. I mean, it's been an entire team effort, but you know, they've all done a great job.
Yeah, including Joel. I wanted you to know I had tried to have a meeting with him last week, but I was told by his assistant that he was covering lunch supervision.
I saw a couple of posts online for D64 sub openings, and they both expire November 15th. Are those going to be extended or renewed?
Yeah.
So even if we do, you know, this parallel employment contract?
Yes.
So I agree with the sentiment that Denise, that you had with, you know, kind of the messaging to our subs, but I do have some concern about crafting that message in a way that we don't want to give the impression that somehow our existing subs have like right of first refusal with us, because I don't think, you know, I don't think that's also in the best interest of the district. I mean, it's up to Joel ultimately who he hires day to day for subs. I just want to make sure whatever we say doesn't legally bind the district to having to check with, you know, Mr. or Mrs. Jones first as our normal sub, and then if they aren't available, then we go to parallel or to, you know, company A, B, or C. Tony, do you see any issue, you know, I mean, how other districts handle that? Because obviously that's the right message to give to our existing subs is we appreciate everything you've done. This is not a, you know, you're out the door. We're hiring people from Iowa or something now, but, you know.
Yeah, no, Joel could probably cover this too. First of all, this is anything but typical.
Right.
For many, many years, I mean, even where I worked, we didn't use these companies because we had an ample amount of people within the community that were willing to do these jobs. This is just a novel, strange, unique time. When I heard Joel say tonight, and I didn't know this, that on any given day, you potentially have 50 people available, that's pretty alarming for a district your size. So you do have to do something. And the balance is going to be, like you said, Rick, we need to do what's best for our kids and for our buildings, and Joel has the discretion to do that, while at the same time, making sure that your current subs that are your subs feel that they are being utilized, because if not, every other district around you will snatch them up in a second.
Yep. So Joel, that I guess we would leave that messaging, you know, up to you, obviously. As you see fit, but I think I'm assuming the board all agrees that we value our existing subs and we want to make sure they understand this isn't we're trying to replace them out here. This is we're in a tight spot.
Right. Yep.
Rebecca, how about your thoughts? We haven't heard from you.
I agreed this is the right thing to do.
Anyone else? All right, Natasha, any public comment that you've received in by email?
We have not received any, no.
Okay, and Dr. Olson, still no one present?
No.
All right, if there's nothing else from the board, then I think we're ready to take a vote on this. And again,
Yeah,
just so for clarification, sorry, Carol, I didn't mean to jump in, but I know on our agenda, we had potentially voting on 2 contracts. We are only voting on 1 contract tonight. The second contract was not even put before the board. The motion that was read was only with respect to parallel and not with respect to swing. So all yours.
Okay, Biagi,
Yes.
Riles,
Yes.
Sotos,
Yes.
Pearl,
Yes.
Little,
Yes.
Ellis, yes, Sanchez,
Yes.
motion carries.
Great. Thanks, Carol. Thank you, Joel, for everything on this.
Thank you. And I'm going to say one last thing. I want to thank also Sue DeLillo, who helps coordinate subs every morning. I forgot to thank her, so give her a shout out.
Yep. All right, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the draft calendar for 21-22. Dr. Olson, I think that's yours.
Yes. So as you can see in the board packet, our suggested calendar for next year is pretty similar to what we have had this year and in the past. The big difference is the beginning of the school year. The last couple of years, we've had large construction projects, so we've started a little later than we normally have. And so this is moving back to more where we normally would begin the school year. And but the breaks, all the pieces line up with District 207. And then the other piece is that it would be changing the name of Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. That's it.
All right, we have a motion in our packets. If someone wants to make that.
No, I think you're just seeing it this time and you'll vote next time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're bringing
Never
it back
mind.
in December.
Never mind. My bad. All right, so any questions from the board on this one? All right, then if not, I guess I would, leave this the same as we said on one of the other ones. If there's questions specific to the calendar that we want to bring to Dr. Olson's attention, and then, raise them to him between now and the December meeting, and then we'll be voting on it in December when that is put formally before the board. Okay.
So,
Oh, sorry,
just
Denise.
no, that's okay. So this year we did have off for election day just in November. And well, there's not an election in the next year cycle. Okay.
Right. So yes, that would be something we'll continually watch, is that, with student attendance on those days. So that's something we want to continue to avoid.
And this year it was a law, but it was only for this election, the 2020 election. It is not for every subsequent election. It was this election only was the law changed for 1 year.
Really? Just this year?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. There is an interesting proposal that you guys will talk about later in the IAB resolutions related to that.
Right.
Okay, we've got a personnel report to approve tonight. So why don't we take oh, I'm sorry, I skipped. Yeah. I crossed off the next one on the list and didn't realize we weren't there. We've got a settlement agreement to discuss that was already discussed in closed session tonight. So Tony, before we take this motion, I just so you can give the ground rules and parameters to the board on this, because this involves a student issue, obviously there's confidentiality with respect to that of what the board were to discuss. Once a motion is made and seconded and the board's able to discuss at that point, there are ground rules we have to abide by in terms of what we can and can't say about this. I think is it safe for me to say that at least the proposed agreement that we have in front of us contains a confidentiality provision in it, which would further restrict the board from any further conversation about it?
Yeah, the thing that restricts you from the conversation about this is the Illinois Student Record Act.
Okay.
It's confidential information. And then yes, furthermore, one of the provisions of the agreement is a confidentiality provision.
So, but just so I and the rest of the board understands, if any board member wants to discuss the appropriateness of entering into this agreement, while the motion is on the table, can anything be discussed, or do we have to go into closed to do that?
You should go into closed session to do that.
Okay. All right, so just so everybody on the board understands, and it's perfectly fine. I guess I would say, well, I think I can ask this without a motion on the table right now. Is there anyone on the board that feels strongly that they would prefer this conversation? We've already had a little bit of a conversation to be briefed on it tonight earlier in the evening. If the board would like to adjourn itself back again into closed session on this issue, happy to bring the board back in on that. We can do it probably at the tail end of the meeting rather than now. But is there anyone who would like to discuss the appropriateness of accepting or not accepting this agreement in closed? All right, then I'm going to take that as we're going to take a up or down in a minute here. So, and while I can ask for public comment on it, we can't really, to the extent that anyone were to say anything that relates to this specifically, we would have to be careful about how that goes. So, all right, so without any further comment, we'll take a motion on this issue.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the settlement agreement with the parents of student 2020-21, parentheses 1.
Second.
Thanks. Denise had the motion and Rebecca has the second. I'd ask if there's any discussion, but the only discussion I'm going to permit is a discussion to go into closed session. So is there any discussion to go into closed? Okay, seeing none. And is there any comment from the public? Okay, we'll take a vote.
Photos. Tom, you're muted if you're listening. We'll skip them for now. Little?
Yeah, I'm
Oh.
yeah, yes.
Okay, Little,
Yes.
Riles,
No.
Pearl,
Yes.
Biaggi,
No.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Salas, yes. Motion carries.
Okay. All right. Now we're moving on to the personnel report, which is 8:10. We want to take a motion on that, and then we can see if there's any discussion or comments from Joel on that.
All right, I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the personnel report dated November 12, 2020, noting that the personnel report is based on the recommendation of the superintendent and not upon the board's direct knowledge regarding any of the specific individuals selected for employment.
Is there a second on this?
Second.
Thanks. Denise has the motion again, and Fred has the second. You're leading the pack tonight, Denise, with motions. Okay, Joel, any comments from you on the personnel report that the board should know about?
No.
Okay. Any comments from the board on the personnel report? And Natasha, any comments on the public?
No public comment.
Dr. Olson, still nobody? Okie dokie. All right, let's take a vote.
Riles,
Yes.
Salas, yes. Little,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Pearl,
Yes.
Biaggi,
Yes.
Sotos,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thanks. All right, as we do with at each meeting with the consent agenda, I'm going to ask, is there anything that needs to be peeled off that anyone would like peeled off of the consent agenda and voted on separately apart from all of the other things in the consent agenda? Okay, and we'll take a motion on the consent agenda.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the consent agenda for November 12th, 2020, which includes bills, payroll, and benefits, approval of financial update for the period ending September 30th, 2020, second reading and approval of policies from Press 105, and destruction of audio closed recordings, none.
Second.
Thanks. Fred had the motion. Tom had the second. Is there any comment from the board on or discussion from the board on the consent agenda? Anything from the public, Natasha? Nope.
Nothing.
Okay, we will take a vote.
Photos. We'll go back to Tom. Biaggi?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yes, for Tom. Biaggi?
Yes.
Pearl?
Yes.
Salas? Yes. Riles?
Yes.
Whittle?
Yes.
Sanchez?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We have approval of minutes. I think everybody was present on the October 8th meeting, so don't think anybody needs to abstain from this. So if we want to take a motion on this as well.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the minutes from the closed meeting on October 8th, 2020, and the regular meeting on October 8th, 2020.
Second.
Thanks, Fred's got the motion. Denise has the second. Any discussion, any changes anybody noticed in there that need to be made? Okay. Comment from the public? Nothing? Okay, we'll take a vote.
Photos.
Yes.
Salas? Yes. Riles?
Yes.
Biaggi?
Yes.
Pearl?
Yes.
Sanchez?
Yes.
Little?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thanks, Carol. All right, so we're moving on to part of the agenda. I know it's towards the end here. This may take 5 minutes or this may take 5 hours. I'm not exactly sure. I don't think this board has ever done this before, at least that I'm aware of. So at the IASB meeting of the delegate assembly, each school board in the state, as I understand it, is permitted to send a delegate to that meeting. And there are various resolutions that are voted on. And they cover a wide variety of topics that the IASB puts forth. And we discussed this, but kind of late in the game last year about sending a delegate. And I think we were too close to the time of which the meeting took place for the board to have a meaningful discussion on the resolutions that were on the table. And at the time, and Dr. Olson and I talking about this, I felt pretty strongly that if we were going to send a delegate there, that the delegate should have the authority of the board to speak for the board, and that would need to be done via vote, in an open meeting, and that we would discuss whatever those resolutions were on the table. So now I understand that, and Dr. Olson, jump in if I've got this wrong, and Tony, you as well, but I understand that some boards handle it a little differently. Some boards give the delegate very specific guidelines and say, this is how you must vote on 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There's others that just send the delegate and say, vote your conscience. And there's probably all sorts of permutations in between, a hybrid of all of the above. Vote your conscience on 1 and 3, but on 2, 4, and 5, you got to vote the way we tell you to do it. So, so I think we've discussed as a board that we would like to go through each of these, and that there needs to be a consensus of the board, a majority of the board that goes one way or the other on whatever each of these resolutions is. And then we are authorizing Carol, who's going to be our delegate, to go down to this meeting to vote on whatever majority of the board feels on each of these resolutions. So all the board members had gotten copies of the resolutions in advance of the meeting. So I'm hoping that since everybody had at least a week or so, as I recall, to get a chance to dive into these a little bit, that we can just sort of go through one by one and check them off and see where we are. Tony, just procedurally, do I need to take I know do I need to take a vote?
Vote on everything, though. Is it set up in our agenda?
Right. I was going to say, do we do it as a whole, or do we have to go one by one and say, I vote, 5 vote this way and 2 vote that way on that one? Then we go down the next resolution and vote that way.
I mean, you can do it either way. You can take a vote on each one, or you can go down and reach a consensus on each one, and then at the end approve the whole entire
vote the whole sort of ballot kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. I don't feel strongly. I know it's set up one way in our packet. I don't feel strongly one way or the other about this. I'm happy just doing a straw poll on each one And as long as we have a majority of folks going one way or the other on it, then we can, we can check that box and say we're a yes on this and a no on that and a yes on this and a no on, and then at the end we just vote, the motion says that. Is everybody comfortable with that approach?
Yeah, and just to be clear, when we say yes or no, do we mean the way that they recommend adopt or do not?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So in some cases, they're going to say don't adopt it, and we may agree with that or not agree with that. So whatever.
Yeah,
Right.
so you either support or oppose the resolution.
Correct. And some resolutions might be to not adopt this, or some resolutions might. So it's going to be like a typical law school exam with double and triple negatives in it, but we'll try and get through that. So, all right. So why don't we just start?
So I'll just give you a brief background, Rick, if I could jump in. So right now we have a proposed consent agenda with various resolutions and position statements, but at the meeting, which will be Saturday at 10 a.m. remotely, people can pull these things off of the consent agenda. So since there's COVID and everything's happening remotely, they did it a little differently this year. So there were 2 prior meetings where these various resolutions were discussed. And if the IASB or this committee recommended opposing the resolution, then the submitting school district had an opportunity to appeal. So it's my understanding, things could have changed, but it looks like resolutions 1, 3, and 8, the recommendation was to oppose those, and I do not believe 1, 3, and 8 were appealed, but we could still talk about those. And then since our board members did have time to, review all of this stuff ahead of time, just so everyone knows, the 3 that I heard input on were 1, 2, and 7. The rest, it seemed as if the board members agreed with the IASB's suggestions. So we'll go through those and I'll try to be fast.
Yep. So Carol, I thought you could maybe, since you're going to be the delegate, I thought you could lead the discussion tonight on this. But Natasha, I have a housekeeping question. Did the public have access to the same document that we have? It was the public facing packet. It included everything. So, okay.
Correct.
Good.
It included that whole committee report and all the resolutions.
Okay, so Carol, I mean, do it however you want, but I don't think we necessarily need to go through a full-blown, summary of each one of these for the public's purpose, because they've had access to this document just like we have. So, but however you want to handle it.
Right. You know what? I'll go in order, but then I'll highlight the ones that people had issues with or comments on. So loan program, one board member, so the ISD recommends to oppose it because let's see, they're saying that the resolution doesn't say what the funds should be for. The state could use the program as an excuse not to provide funds that the school districts need, and that the state might not have enough money to fund the loan program. And I believe that's one that was not appealed. So does anyone oppose, or does anyone disagree with the IASB's recommendation to oppose that resolution? Okay, so that one's done. And then this number 2, that's the big controversial one, I think, for this whole meeting. This is the one on gun storage. So the resolution, you guys read it. I'm not going to read it for you because, or I'm not going to waste everyone's time reading it. So the arguments in favor of the gun storage resolution would be, number 1, that Illinois would join other states that have similar laws. 2, gun violence is a threat to students in schools. 3, school board members need to do anything they can to prevent the school shooting. 4, people under 18, we should make sure that they don't have access to firearms to keep kids and communities safe. And then there are various arguments against this resolution. 1, school boards have a role in keeping kids safe in school, but shouldn't dictate what happens at home. Students might be more successful if the school got involved in all aspects of their life, including sleep, nutrition, and all that sort of thing, but things happen in the home that are beyond the scope of the school board. So then at one of the virtual, meetings, various people from school districts, so other school districts, they did discuss these at an earlier meeting. So they were able to kind of say how their district felt. The ones in favor, or some of the ones in favor, were D54 in Schaumburg, D41 in Glen Ellen, Naperville, one I think D211 and D204. And D204, that guy mentioned that it's the 3rd largest school district. So they were in support. A couple that were against it were D21, D25, and a bunch of other ones. So the people who were against it were saying that was no way to enforce this. Apparently, there's also a House bill pending too that addresses this. So the people who were in favor thought that it would be good that if the IASB were asked, that they could say one way or another. So there were 2 board members who mentioned to me that they disagreed with the IASB's recommendation to oppose it. So they were in favor of supporting this. Does anyone want to talk about it?
I was one of those people. And Larry, I think maybe you were the other.
Yep. Weapons should be locked up, period. We shouldn't say a certain age weapon should be locked up, or if children have access to a weapon. If they're actually coming to the board or coming to a school district and actually asking this question, weapons should be locked up. They should be in secure storage all the time.
I agree.
And I think the position counter to adopting this is not questioning whether firearms should be locked up, but whether the IASB should be advocating one way or the other for this, and it becomes a slippery slope of then should you be advocating for, making sure that people serve nutritious meals at home, and whether they should be doing a variety of other things. So I see this as not a debate about gun safety laws, but whether or not the IASB should be wading into a territory like this that's outside the scope of what's in a school district.
What I found just totally uncompelling about the other argument is if a kid doesn't get enough sleep or adequate nutrition, additional students couldn't die. So I just think that's a lame argument, which is why I just think that anything that we can do, even if it's just a policy, to make less guns available to kids who would take them into a school, we should take the position, even if it ultimately isn't enforceable.
This one, I think I should just go around just to see preliminarily if I should check the box, support or oppose, so that when we vote on everything, we'll know. Okay, so.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
How does the ISBA's recommendation affect families who have concealed carry?
I think that's a separate issue. I think this doesn't affect whether you can, you have to still get your concealed carry license. I think this was just about.
I think this is about
it's about storage at home.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
If I have my concealed carry, and I'm not saying I do, but I'm saying if I did, and I have my weapon on me, even when I'm at home or in my garage or on my it's just I'm just wondering how it affects that. Does it if it was enforceable, would that mean that people with a concealed carry, if they wanted to abide by the recommendations here, that they would have to lock up their guns whenever they entered their home? They would have to get it off their body and into a storage facility. I'm just wondering how that would be affected by that.
So this is the text of the resolution. It says that the IASB shall support and advocate for legislation which strengthens child-safe gun storage laws in the state of Illinois, requiring gun owners to store firearms, whether they are loaded or unloaded, in a securely locked container if a person under the age of 18 is likely to gain access to the weapon without permission.
So it's not about carrying it, it's about when you store it.
No, it sounds to me, the way it sounds to me is that if there's someone around you that's under the age of 18, that you must store it. I don't know. I tried to understand it myself when I read it, and I was having a really hard time with. I understand the part of it where, hey, if your gun's at home, don't leave it on the kitchen counter. That's real clear. But most gun owners wouldn't, and I would support making sure that they don't. But it's not clear as to how it affects the concealed carry portion when someone is, you know, sitting on their couch and there's people under the age of 18 around.
So right now it applies to kids up to the age of 14, and then this change would increase that to 18.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so should I do the little straw poll, or does anyone have more comments?
Why don't you, I was going to say, why don't you see if anybody's opposed to it?
Yeah, okay.
Or I should say opposed to, here's our double negative, opposed to the resolution to not adopt it, or in favor of it. Why don't you go that way? I mean, I'm guessing you're probably going to have, you know.
Okay, I'm just going to ask who supports this. So Sotos, do you support this resolution?
To be clear, the resolution is to not adopt it, so I support not adopting.
No, so the resolution is the resolution. I'm not asking if you support the IASB's recommendation, just so we don't, you know, get rid of this double negative stuff. Do you support the resolution about gun storage?
And to be clear, the resolution states that guns should be stored in a safe when there are children up to the age of 18 who can gain access to it.
Yes.
So I do not support that resolution.
Okay. Little?
Yes, I do support it.
Sanchez?
Yes, I do support it.
Riles?
Yes, I support it.
Biaggi?
Yes, I support it.
Pearl?
I do not.
Salas, yes. Okay. The next one is the school report card. That was one that wasn't appealed. No one really had comments on it, but stop me if you want to talk about it. The issue is that the deadline probably couldn't be met. While it was good as an aspirational goal, it probably couldn't happen. The pre-K teacher licensure, does anyone want to discuss that? The IESB opposes that resolution. No one contacted me about that either. The teacher shortage one, the IESB does support it. E-learning on election day, IESB does support it, that you do e-learning instead of, you know, in-person learning on election day, which Tony mentioned earlier that, you know, this is, you know, one of the relevant ones. The local control pandemic.
Wait, Carol, are we going to talk about each one of these, or?
If anyone wants to, just stop me if you disagree with IESB, but so far, or prior to this, I didn't receive any comments about whether anyone disagreed with the IESB recommendation.
Yeah, but I think the point of tonight
Sure.
was having the public comment and not relying on what was sent to you on a private email. So I think we need to have whatever public comments were sent to you or not sent to you privately, even though they're FOIA-able, we need to discuss that in public for transparency purposes.
Right, so I'll just say that school report card, the IESB recommended that we oppose that, and that was not appealed. Pre-K teacher licensure, IESB recommended that be opposed also. The teacher shortage, the IESB recommended that be supported. E-learning on election day, meaning no in-person learning, the IESB recommended that be supported so that kids wouldn't be in school for safety reasons.
Tony, can you jump in on that one? I know you commented that it's an interesting one, and are you hearing things from other districts on this that, you know, feel strongly one way or the other?
The first thing, and the way I'm reading it, it's not going to mandate.
Right.
It's going to give you so you're only, you know, but for 2020-21, before the pandemic, e-learning was only allowed for specific reasons. And prior to this, it was snow days. So now, obviously, it's much more liberal during the pandemic. So what they're trying to do is give you another reason where a local school board can decide on those days, instead of having student attendance or having to have a day of non-student attendance, we can actually do e-learning on that day, but you would not be mandated to do that. It still would be your choice.
And it would be open to any election, so not just a national election, but a consolidated, like a Cook County consolidated election or something like that. Any type of election, right?
Yes, and the purpose is obviously because you guys are a polling place.
Right.
Yeah, so if you're being used as a polling place, and obviously we have security and safety issues, but then on elections, for some reason, we let everybody in the building. So that's the concern.
So then they don't have to close.
Right.
Hypothetically, Tony, I know this is specific to elections, but hypothetically, if a vaccine comes out for COVID, I'll say when, just to be optimistic, but when a vaccine comes out for COVID and it has, 330 million people should get inoculated for it, I'm guessing that they're going to probably be turning to a lot of large facilities like schools, gymnasiums probably to, do things in. I know this particular issue, this particular thing that we're talking about here does not necessarily impact that scenario because it's related specifically to elections, but is there anything from a legal perspective that's like this election issue that would give us the right to shut things down for the day?
Not that I'm aware of. And the reason that this is specific to election is because the school code mandates that you guys have to be a polling place. You don't have discretion. Those other things you just mentioned, unless they change the law, you would have to allow that to happen.
Well, let's say the governor issued an emergency order and said, I want every school in the state of Illinois to serve as an emergency inoculation center for the week of, March 1st through 7th or something like that.
Yeah.
And then then it's law at that point, or at least it's an executive order.
They would probably specifically address then whether or not you'd have the right to do this. Yeah.
Okay, that's sort of where I'm going. Is this this isn't going to give us that out to do it, but an executive order like that would likely cover a scenario where we could go e-learning,
right?
And not that get dinged for that,
right?
In that case, okay.
Yep.
Okay, so that was number 6. Are there any other comments about that? The IASB. So all of the IASB's recommendations were in that packet that was in it's in the 2020 resolutions committee report. I know there's a lot of text and it's pretty long, but after each resolution, it says what the resolutions committee recommends, and then they, in all caps, say do adopt or do not adopt. So, Rick, I'm just saying that part is disclosed to the public. I do have, like a handy checklist that I'm going to fill out and bring to the virtual meeting on Saturday just to see what I'm supposed to do. And then just to reiterate, the only ones that I received comments on, which we will discuss, tonight, or have discussed a couple of them, are resolutions 1, 2, and 7. And then any other further, comments that anyone has today, and then we'll, the 1, 2, we discussed those already. And then 7, this is the one that we're on right now. One board member had an issue with number 7. The IASB recommends that we support local control during the pandemic because some areas had 0 COVID cases, and then they compared it to the Chicagoland area with many COVID cases, or not, more COVID cases than that. So does anyone have feelings about whether to support this local control resolution?
Tony, can you give us some legal context on this, on just sort of where this fits in on, the district's authority and whatnot?
So there were 2, right? There's 7 and 8.
And
8. 8 seemed to be more broad. It was local school districts should decide. 7 is more about a more regional approach to closures, unlike what happened in the spring, right? Where the whole state was closed. So the Illinois State Board of Education has that authority. So what it seems that they're looking for is for whether school districts are support of them lobbying to put a restriction in on ISB and the governor and the state, where they can't do a just blanket closure, that they'd have to approach it regionally based on the metrics in each of the area, which is something similar to what Illinois is doing now. But at the end of the day, yes, you do have the local authority to open and close your schools, subject, however, to the Illinois State Board of Education, which can overrule all of you.
Right. So if ISB says we have to shut down, doesn't matter what the 7 of us think.
Right.
Yep.
7 and 8 were similar. In the notes to 8, it says that 8 was recommended that we do not adopt it because it's almost identical to 7, which they are recommending. Should I take the straw poll on 7, or does anyone have any other questions or comments? I could read the bullet points for the arguments in favor or against if anyone wants, or does anyone?
Nope.
No, okay. So number 7, the IASB recommends that we support it. Sanchez, what do you think? Do you agree, yes or no?
Fred?
Fred, do you agree that we should support resolution number 7?
Yeah, I think I'm generally in favor of it.
Pearl,
Yes, I think I'm more in favor of it. Thank you.
Biaggi,
Yep, I'm in favor of 7.
Sotos,
Yes, I'm in favor of 7.
Little,
Yes.
Riles,
Yes.
Salas, yes. Okay, so 7. Okay, number 8, we're saying yes to 7. Does anyone have any strong feelings about 8? Or does anyone, okay, so does anyone disagree with opposing 8?
Tony, is there a compelling argument that 8 is in fact materially different from 7, such that we should, that it serves some other purpose? Because I mean, I think Isby's saying, it's the same.
Right. I mean, it's somewhat nuanced, but it's covering the same topic and it's address the same issue. So yeah, I think you probably need to support 1.
Correct. And then the submitting district for 8 supports number 7.
Right. So unless anybody feels strongly that 8 is better than 7, I mean.
Okay, and then the existing positions, that is numbers 9, 10, and 11. Those start on page 13 of that resolutions committee report. The IASB recommends that we support 9, 10, and 11. And then the new belief statement number 12 on equity, the IASB also recommends that we support that. I didn't receive any comments on 9, 10, 11, or 12, so I think that's about it. And then I have.
Well, so I have a comment.
Okay.
I mean, so to me, 9, 10, and 11 sound very anti-charter school, the way I read them all in tandem. Am I missing something?
It
there?
did sound like that, especially in the comments. Like the comments for number 9, it says state authorized charter schools take resources away from the local hosted. So they,
Right. So I strongly oppose any of them that oppose charter schools, for the record.
Does anyone else want to discuss any of these existing positions or belief statements? So that's the thing too. Those, like I said, they are on the IASB's consent agenda for tomorrow, and we'll see if someone takes them out, or if you guys want me to. Or you know what, I could just not even vote on 9, 10, 11, 12 if we can't agree. That's another option.
Well, I'm just one of 7, so.
Mm-hmm. Tom, we can't hear you.
I oppose all 3 of those as well if they're recommending. Okay. Yeah, I oppose all 3 of those as well if all 3 of them, the way I read them, are opposing charter schools.
So resolution 10, there were no arguments against it. So resolution 10, one of the explanations in favor of 10 is that one of the founding ideals for charter schools is that they address at-risk students. Not all charter schools do this, but Illinois should make state authorized charter schools focus on at-risk students as prescribed in law. And then number 11, the arguments in favor of it talk about charter schools receiving funding intended for local school districts, but no additional revenue coming from the state to make the local school district whole. Says Illinois needs to address the funding of charter schools by providing additional revenue or changing the way these charter schools receive funding. And then there are no arguments against number 11.
Yeah, I disagree with 11 and
Okay.
12.
So the, oh yeah, 10 and 11. 12 is the new.
I'm sorry,
belief, yeah.
not 12, 10 and 11. Yeah, not 9. I'm fine with. 10 and 11, I am not in favor of.
Does anyone else have opinions about 9, 10, or 11?
I'm okay with them as they are.
I agree as well.
Okay, so Biagi, no. For those, Sotos is no. Pearl is yes. Little is yes. Dallas, yes. Sanchez, what do you feel
No.
about? Okay,
No on
no.
10 and I think I would go no on 11 as well, to be honest with you.
Okay. Riles, how do you feel about 9, 10, and 11?
I'm okay with 9, 10, and 11's no.
And then Fred, you're okay with 9 also?
I am.
Okay. Okay. So then the new belief statements equity, is anyone against that resolution? The ISB recommends that we support that.
Good with that as it is.
Okay. So it looks like we, so we disagree with the ISB with the recommendation of number 2, the gun storage, it seems like, or at least the majority disagree with opposing the gun storage resolution.
And then 10 and 11.
Exactly. And then 10 and 11, we have 4 no's.
Right.
For 10 and 11.
And we agree on everything else. We agree on the recommendations of ISB on everything
Correct.
else.
You having fun, Carol?
Say that again, Rick. We agree. Let's just focus on that
We
for
agree.
a second. I mean, we agree.
Okay, so then to the extent that 10 and 11 remain on the consent agenda, you know what, I could also just, see, that's the thing, if I vote no on the consent agenda, there are some that you guys are in favor of that could remain on there. So that's how it could get complicated.
Make them do what we do.
Yeah.
You know, make a motion and peel off stuff.
Yeah.
Just demand things when you walk in, Carol.
Exactly.
I think
Because it's the first time doing this. It's
Yeah, right. It's the
exactly what
first
you wanna
time,
do.
so
It's
why
the
not?
first
Yeah, just
time.
tell everybody we're running the show in 64.
Exactly.
We know how this is going to go down.
Yeah, I think for purposes of what we're doing here, whatever we agreed to in the majority, you would vote that way, and whatever we disagreed to, you would vote that way. You had mentioned earlier of not voting on something if we couldn't come to an agreement, but it seems that there's a majority there. There's no split of not being able to come to an agreement. So I think we have to. You would have to vote one way or the other, and not abstain from any of them.
But it sounds like, Tom, there might be a consent agenda where there's multiple resolutions where we're yes on some and no on others, and unless she can take a vote individually on each of those items, she's going to have to vote on the entirety of the consent agenda, and we're no on some and yes on others. So she's kind of stuck. That, like what we do here, if we feel we're stuck, we peel them off.
So if they don't allow her to peel them off, what are our directions to her? To abstain or to vote, or to vote based on the majority of what's in that consent? So if, for instance.
Yeah, no, I get, you're right. Tony, what do you think we can do in this situation?
I'm trying to look at the procedures right now because I'm not sure. I think you may be allowed to remove.
You could,
Okay.
it says,
Yeah,
Well,
ISD, yeah.
yeah,
No, go
like
ahead.
you can, like any consent agenda, I believe that an individual district will be able to say, we want to pull that off. They're going to try to do it quickly probably and say, do you all agree? But you may not be the only district that's doing that, but I'm trying to read through the process right now. I thought it addressed it in there.
Well, so let me ask this. Do we need to figure this out tonight, or can we give Carol the authority? You know, she's already got, well, we have to vote on it, but she's already got the yes, no, yes, no, yes, no's. And she's going to be bound by something, whatever happens at that meeting. If they get peeled off or they let her peel it off, it happens. And I mean, I guess the default though, I guess the question is, what's the default if they don't let you peel them off? How can you vote on a consent agenda where we've got yes and no's, you know, within there? What do we do?
So I agree with you, Rick. I think the only direction we need to give Carol is if she can't peel off, what would be the directions from us?
Right.
Would it be to
I could
abstain?
just
Would it be to
abstain, right.
abstain on the whole thing, or would it be to vote on the majority of how we voted on the majority of the issues in that section?
Right. Right. I think that's exactly what it is. It's one of those two.
Okay, so it's either abstain if we, we don't peel them off, or then vote however we suggested.
Right.
How we
And Tom,
decided.
I think the only reason why we might not be able to make that decision that you just laid out tonight is, what if the consent agenda peels off some, but not others, and then it screws up the numbers or whatever. We don't know what's going to happen until it actually happens. So I think Carol, I think you've got to vote, I think in that case, you have to kind of vote your conscience at that point. And if you know where the board stands on those issues, to Tom's point, if a majority of those issues left, we were no on, then you got to vote no on it. If they were yes, you got to vote yes on them.
Right. And the other
Tony,
half
I think it's under number 8 for
Yeah.
resolutions procedures,
Number.
right at the very bottom of page 7, resolutions procedures, under order of resolution.
Yeah, that's
There is a third option, and the third option is Carol has been pretty thorough with this, and she's been pretty thorough with listening to what we've all had to say about each of these issues, and we can all just trust that she'll do the best she can for our district. If we can't come to a final determination on how to handle certain issues, and if a curveball comes up, I think before this meeting's over, we should at least give her some confidence that if a curveball we haven't discussed comes up, that we all support her to make the decision for us.
Since we're so divided though on a lot of these things, I could just abstain. This is going to be electronic voting because it's going to be a Zoom meeting, unlike the normal meeting in prior years. So, I guess they can't compel me to vote yes or no if we don't have the full agreement of the board. So I could just skip whatever, the board is not in favor of, if that makes more sense.
I mean, yeah, the procedure under the order of resolutions does say that reaffirmation or deletion of existing positions will be done with a single motion unless a delegate wishes a particular position or position to be considered separately.
And so it takes just one delegate, just like we do at the board here, right? One board member can peel off a consent agenda item. It sounds like, Carol, you could do that, or anybody could.
Yeah, it looks like the consent agenda will only include the ones that they are recommending that you do adopt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we didn't discuss page 15 to all those position statements. If you guys were able to look at all of the red lines, those also ended up on the consent agenda. And they were just basically cleaning up their prior position statements. And for some of them, it looked like, there were studies that were already completed, and various other things. So did anyone want to discuss the revisions to the position statements?
Thanks for doing this, Carol. I'm glad we can talk about this and can vote on it. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So speaking of vote, I think we need to make a motion. Carol, if you want to make the motion, I'm just looking back at the language of how we've got it drafted for tonight. Does it, I guess it's open-ended the way the wording is, that it just says approve the board recommendation. Tony, do we need to enumerate each of those positions again, or is it because it's in the record, are we okay with just making the motion as is?
As is.
Good.
Okay,
All right,
so
then there you
just to
go.
summarize, the ones where we disagreed with the IASB were gun storage, because the majority supports the gun storage resolution, right? Let's see, correct, that was 5. And the reaffirmation of existing positions, number 10 and 11. Is
Right.
that correct? Okay.
Yep.
And then the rest, we agreed with ISB's recommendations, which for the public, those are in the packet.
Yep.
Okay. So I'll just make this motion. I move that the Board of Education Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the board's recommendations for the votes on the proposed resolutions at the 2020 IASB Assembly as discussed at tonight's meeting and agreed upon.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on that motion? It was moved by Carol and seconded by Rebecca.
No, I just want to say that Carol's the most thorough person I know. So I trust you and thank you for doing all that.
Rick, I do have a public comment, but unrelated to this discussion.
Okay, why don't we hold that till after the vote and then we'll entertain that. Is it related to any agenda item?
No, it's more of a general comment.
Okay, I don't know that I'm going to entertain that, but we'll get to it in a second. Let's vote then. All right, so any other discussion from the board right now on this? Okay, anything from the public on this issue? Natasha, anything from the public on this issue? Nope.
No, nothing.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Carol?
Sanchez,
Yes.
Pearl,
Yes.
Biaggi,
Yes.
Soto,
Yes.
Little,
Yes.
Riles,
Yes.
Fellas, yes, motion carries.
Okay, so that comment, if it's out of order, if it's a non-agenda item, then I'm not going to entertain that right now. You can forward it to the board after the meeting and to the superintendent.
We'll do
all right.
so.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Olson.
Yes. So first of all, our next board meeting is December 10th. And Denise and I had the opportunity to attend the North Cook Division Fall Dinner. Denise, do you want to comment a little bit on it? And then I can do the same.
And Carol attended as well.
Oh, and Carol.
Right, Carol? Yep. No, that's okay.
Yeah,
so Denise and Carol.
it was virtual, so we couldn't see each other.
Right.
You want to go, Carol?
No, you can do it, Denise.
Okay. So there were, gosh, it feels like it was so long ago, Eric. There were several different speakers representing different areas of kind of handling the pandemic was the theme of the evening. I thought it was really helpful, food for thought, and just for other board members, and then Carol and Eric can comment, just how stressful this is for all administrators, board members, keeping unified, how different districts were handling the pandemic was presented. Communication was talked about. How is the district telling its story during the pandemic, after the pandemic? Those are some of my kind of takeaways.
Yeah, I would agree. And it was, now some of them were superintendents that I talked to regularly. So I knew their plans, but it was still just, I think, good for them to share. And I think Denise and Carol got to hear a couple other examples of just how things are going. I will also comment that 3 out of the 4 speakers were really strong, and I agreed with everything they were saying. One of the speakers, I was a little surprised. He seemed pretty strong that we're never, ever going to return back to the education that we once knew. and that the pandemic has changed things forever. So I just couldn't agree with him that far. You know, I do agree some things are going to change, but I don't think it's going to go where school is unrecognizable in the future. So it was interesting to hear somebody take that strong of a stance. I had not heard that previously. So it was interesting just to hear that perspective, even if I don't agree with it.
Well, and I think that perspective was more of like I interpreted it negatively. And I think there's going to be a change for education, but I think it's going to be some positive that the pandemic has promoted a positive change. And how do we think about something differently?
Exactly. All right, Denise or Carol, anything else on that? Okay, and then I know that we wanted to revisit board communication and just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Do you want to start that, Rick?
Sure. So, you know, I think, I know I reached out to a couple board members after last month's meeting. We were all getting inundated with email messages. And I reached out to a couple board members because it was made public on Facebook that a couple of board members had reached out, or I should say responded maybe, to emails that had come in individually, and then questioned why others, including yours truly, didn't respond to them in a timely fashion. And I think, you know, just to revisit what the policy that the board has with respect to this, and this isn't about me, and I don't care if I'm, you know, made to be the bad guy in this. That's not the point, but it's about the board president's position in general. And I think we agreed at the outset of this board being seated that the board president would respond to, or the superintendent would respond on behalf of the board to email messages that came in or other communications that came into the board. Different than if it was a neighbor who sent an email that said, "Hey, Rick, I'm wondering about blah, 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 blah." And again, if Rick wasn't the board president, if Rick was just a regular board member. And at that point, I think we kind of made the fine line distinction that if it was a specific message to a specific board member asking, "Hey, can you look into this for me?" or "Hey, can you, check this out?" that we all agreed that that didn't need to flow through the normal chain of command and go through the board president or go up to the superintendent. It could be that board member then relaying that message on to whomever it needed to hear it, most likely the superintendent. So I think we kind of got tripped up on that in this last time. Again, I'm not, this isn't sour grapes. I'm not mad that I was made to be the bad guy in this thing. But I just want to illustrate that that's what happens. What happened was a couple of board members responded, that went out on Facebook, and then they were suggesting that the board president wasn't being responsive to the public at that point. And I think not only did that reflect poorly on me, it reflected poorly on the board. So I wanted to just kind of open that up for discussion. I am happy if we want to revisit what the board policy is with respect to communications. I'm all ears. I'm not suggesting that we need to keep it that way. I'm just suggesting that those were the ground rules we agreed to a year and a half ago, and we seem to have veered off that path a little bit recently. And I fully understand the board was getting a lot of heat, and the board was getting a million messages a day, for a period of time there. So, Dr. Olson, did I kind of summarize that? Tony, anything you want to add, to that discussion?
Nope. I mean, it is up to the board. You've already hit the point. You guys have a policy. You should adhere to the policy. But if the policy isn't working for the board, they should revisit the policy and go through your proper channels for changing the policy.
Yep.
So Rick,
yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Rick,
Sorry.
can I ask, you didn't reach out to me, so I'm assuming it wasn't me who responded, because I didn't respond to anyone. However, I do want to ask a question. Were the responses, because I remember back when we were making this board policy, I had made a point that if someone sends an email, responding back with, "Hey, thanks for the email, someone will get back to you," without giving any real, information, is something that I would want to continue to do. I haven't done it in this situation. However, I just want to know, were these emails that these board members were responding with, were they responding, as they were speaking for the entire board? Were they responding as they were speaking just generally for themselves? Or were they just simply responding saying, hey, I got your email, I read it, you'll be hearing from somebody, per our board policy?
They were
how did it play out?
Yeah, they were much more innocuous. They were more of the, I hear you, we're all in this together kind of, comment. They were not providing a substantive response to the issue or providing, something that would be inconsistent with the board. It wasn't anything like that at all. The point of bringing it up, though, is that it illustrates, even in that scenario where the email was innocuous, the folks who were involved from the public in sending those communications then turn that on the board and suggest that, pitted board member against board member and saying, well, this person's being responsive and that person's not being responsive. When we had agreed as a board that there would be a unified message, especially with respect to an issue as hot button as in-person learning.
So correct me if I'm wrong in how I interpreted the agreement by the board. I do remember the board agreeing that any detailed response would come from the president, but I also recall, I don't recall board members being forbidden from responding to the emails at letting people know that they received them.
I agree with you. Yeah.
So what are we asking for here? Are we asking to change that to where only that we don't respond to anything, period, so that we can avoid the optics of one member not responding when another one does? Is that what's being asked here?
I'm not necessarily asking for anything. I think the reason that it was brought up is it's illustrative of the difficulty of this issue, because when the board doesn't speak as one voice, even if it's innocuous, the public, especially on an issue that's very controversial, can use it against the board. And I think that's what happened in this particular case. I'm not saying it was wrong for the board members to have responded the way they did, or that the substance of those emails was wrong at all. I'm not suggesting that at all. What I'm really saying is, if we don't agree with the way the policy is written right now, then we should revisit it. And I'm fine with having that, go back to the policy committee and having a discussion as a board at some point on that. It's a tough subject.
Yeah, and so I think I was one of the folks who responded, and responding with sort of what Tom is saying. I heard your message, and it was really, it's almost like I think Rick, like the auto reply you have. I heard your message, thanks for the feedback. That's really what it was. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think my interpretation of the policy, because I agree with board policy. I agree with being unified. I agree with one voice. And I hope you guys know that how I am as a board member. But I didn't think that was breaking the policy. I didn't speak about the board.
Yeah, no, I don't think it does break. I don't think it did break the policy. If I was unclear about that, I don't think that an innocuous email of "I hear ya" or "Thanks for your message," I don't think that is violating the policy. I think in this particular case, it just illustrates that when we have a very sensitive issue with the board, if one of us goes and responds and 6 of us don't, who I don't care which one it is, and the other 6, I don't care which of the other 6 don't respond, the other 6 could be made to look out to be bad folks for not responding. Because if we all make a habit of each responding and say, "I hear you, thanks for sending your email," then that's the expectation of the community every single time a communication comes into the board. And that's fine if that's where we want to go. But then that means all 7 of us need to start responding to every email that comes back with at least if nothing else, as you said, Denise, an auto reply that says, "Thanks for your message. I appreciate it. Your message will be addressed by the superintendent or the board president," which is fine. If that's where we want to go, cool. But we got to change the board policy to do that.
Okay, so you're thinking we all have to agree upon that, is what I'm hearing. That's what you want.
It's not what I want. It's what I'm just telling you. I was made out to be the bad guy in this one. So, but and the next time it might be you being the bad guy for not responding. It could be any of us, right?
Oh, any of us will get onto the. I'm not disagreeing with that, Rick. And I guess if we're thinking about updating our policy, I would want the policy committee to look at it and then time to think about it. When I saw board communication on the agenda, I was not sure what that was, and so you know, I mean, I'm like, you know, I didn't know what that was going to mean and what this conversation was going to be. So I, you know, like a little heads up to think about what the
Oh yeah,
policy should be, if it should be amended.
And I think that if we want to entertain that conversation, I think the policy committee should go back and rethink it, and then maybe come back with some recommendations to the board on what, you know, what their thoughts are. And I'm not suggesting we change the policy. I'm just saying if the board's will is to change the policy, we should do that. But
So we'll discuss it, I guess, at our next policy meeting. But I don't think I read that policy the same as you, if we're talking about the same one. But
well, what's your read of it?
So if, let's see, if you're talking about, let's see, 8:10, connection with the community, it says that the president's the official spokesperson for the school board. And I think this issue came up before when I think Denise asked you, you know, if you're responding on behalf of the board, I'd like to know what is going on or what you're telling people. And so, yes, it does say that you're the only one who could speak on behalf of the board. But if individual board members are talking to people,
oh yeah, that's different. But what,
right,
but Carol, here's the
responding.
hypothetical. There's two hypotheticals. One is, so, and I know this is a fine line, but this is, I guess, how I think. But if someone sends the same email to all 7 of us, but each email is directed to each of us individually, dear Denise, dear Carol, dear Rick, dear, you know, down the line, that's one thing, versus dear Board of Education. Same email, substance of the email, but it's sent to all 7 email addresses, but it's directed to the board. Is it proper for one board member other than the president to respond to that email that's directed to the board under the policy?
So that would be 2:140 is communications to and from the board.
So you're saying if someone CC'd everybody, it's one situation. If somebody sent an individual email to each of us that just so happened to have cut and paste the same substance, it's a different situation.
I think it could be construed differently. I don't know that it's necessarily materially that much different, but I think one could make the argument it is different.
Well, the only difference I see there is that the board member who receives the email individually doesn't necessarily know that anyone else got it. So
right.
the only way to solve not responding would be to have a agreement by all of us that any communications to any board members get forwarded to the president, who then gives direction as to whether we can respond or not.
Right.
We already have that, don't we? Isn't that already our policy, what we've agreed upon?
No, if someone sends us an independent email, we can respond to it, but we need to CC the president so he knows what's going on.
Right. So if somebody, so if somebody emails Tom and says, "Hey Tom, the dumpsters are overflowing over at Franklin. I know your kids, you know, were there and you live near there, so can you check it out for me?" And then Tom responds and says, "Yep, I'm sending this on to Dr. Olson, and he's going to take care of it." And he would CC the board president.
Okay.
I think that's a scenario, right? That's a scenario if we get individuals. I think Rick, now that I've heard all this, I think what Rick is saying is if we all get an email and we're all CC'd on that email and we can all see that we all received it, our default should automatically be to allow one person to be the person that responds so that it avoids the issue of us looking like one person's responding but another isn't, or one person responds quicker than another. And I can see the argument if I was the board president with the job to have to respond and I was busy doing my day job and I wasn't able to respond quickly enough, not saying I wasn't going to respond, but I couldn't get to it quick enough where another board member who may have that day off and happens to have a little bit more time on their hands that day, responds sooner. I can see how that would make one board member look, less attentive than another. So I just wanted to get the clarification between in getting individual emails and whether we would get emails in bulk. So now I got that clarified.
So the policy right now says that the individual board members will not reply to an email on behalf of the entire board. That's how it's written. It says on behalf of the entire board. So if someone's responding individually and has their little disclaimer that it's not on behalf of the entire board, is that a violation of that policy as it's written? That's 2:140.
Yeah, I don't think it is. Yeah, no, I don't
Right,
think it is a
yeah.
violation of that policy. I think the question is that, do we understand the ramifications of that? Because we just saw it play out a couple of weeks ago in full view, where at least one board member was made out to be, less than attentive, shall we say, when there was a conscious decision made by the administration and the board president not to respond to the influx of cut and pasted emails every day. That's the concern. And again, to me, that's where the violation occurred, because there was a decision made here by the administration not to respond to that, and a less than a majority of the board took it upon themselves to respond to it, one way or the other. Whether it was just simply to respond and say, "Thanks, I got your email," or anything, there was a decision. There was a conscious decision made not to respond to those.
So Rick, how would you recommend in the future, when administration and potentially the board president make a conscious decision to not respond to emails that are being sent to the board, but a board member disagrees with that, decision? How do
not to respond?
What would be the board member? Me personally, you just gave a scenario, and I'm disagreeing 1,000%. Just because administration made a conscious decision to not respond, we as board members have an obligation to our community, and we may have a different thought as to how we would want to handle emails to us as differently than what the administration may have. So in that scenario, would you, as the board president, expect me to call you up first and say, "Hey, Rick, I'm disagreeing with your guys' conscious decision to not respond. I need you to respond to these people. Please talk it over with administration. If you guys still disagree to do it, I'm going to go ahead and do it." At least I gave you the heads up and gave you the opportunity.
Right. Well, that presumes you even knew there was a conscious decision, which I think you guys didn't know there was a conscious decision. So I'm saying the whole thing was messed up to begin with, right? I get it. I understand it was moving fast. And again, this is illustrative of the difficulty of this policy. I mean, we talked for hours about it at the beginning when we put it in place. We rehashed it when this board got seated, and I think we're still struggling with, what's the spirit of it, and what, I remember having almost the opposite conversations when this current board got seated, a year and a half ago, about who was allowed to say what to whom, and, making sure that people didn't speak on social media and there were no comments made. And, again, I think we just need to stick to a particular position and then stay with that going forward. And because I think we veered off path on this one.
Let the record show that I disagreed with this entire policy, and I wanted us to all be able to speak on our own. But I honored it. But I honored it because I lost to the rest of you.
Right. No, and that's what I'm bringing up, is that you were the target of this a year and a half ago, and now it's kind of come full circle around. So.
And I don't know. I just wonder if anyone else. I hear Rick. You might have a concern on that. Does anyone else have a concern with a board member responding to an email saying, "I received your email, thanks for the feedback," or just something? I just want to know from Larry or Fred, or what your thoughts are.
I feel the same way as Rick, and I was upset too, because it made the rest of us appear as if, we didn't care, or we were ignoring it, or we were non-responsive. And I thought we all agreed that we weren't going to do what played out. And so it's a little bit frustrating to see it play out.
And I guess I know I hear what you're saying. I do see that. I mean, and I'm going to say, I think we could say the same on social media. I think, Tom, you have been better on social media, but you still respond, and I look like I don't respond. And so I don't see the difference in those two things. So help me out with that.
I'll help you out with that. Social media, I'm responding to other people's pages. I'm responding to my personal Facebook page. I'm not responding to my Board of Education email. So there's one. But more importantly, I want you to understand, I didn't have a problem with you responding. I didn't agree with this policy in the first place. So I was okay with you responding. So I'm not in that camp. As when it comes to me on Facebook, my responses on Facebook are extremely acceptable to this board. And I think if this board ever had a problem with it, they should tell me. But I rarely respond. And when I do, I'm doing it as an individual, not as a board member. If you've looked at all of my responses since you all asked me to pull back, I don't respond as a board member. I don't, if they're asking me a question as a board member, I don't respond at all. I don't even use the caveat of I'm only responding for myself. And sometimes when I do respond and it seems that if it might be crossing a threshold of board member or personal, I throw in the caveat that, hey, this is just my personal opinion. This has nothing to do with the board. So actually, I think I've been pretty perfect since you guys asked me to pull back a little.
And not to interrupt the discussion, but we also have a public comment related to this item.
Okay.
Rick, you can choose to enter it or not.
Sure.
Just as a reminder to people, I know it's hard to remember when it's by email, but generally when you submit a public comment, we do like people to identify themselves. So on this one, I can only say that it comes from NPN Mom Park Ridge. Along the lines of communication, what is the board's policy on individual board members engaging in dialogue on Facebook regarding matters of education in our community?
Okay, so well, we're not going to answer that question necessarily. We've just taken it under advisement right now. But
so I'm at Roosevelt, and it looks like our Wi-Fi went out, so I'm just doing the hotspot with my phone.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, it looks like, Lori, you've been elevated to superintendent because Dr. Olson's gone right now. So congratulations.
So Dr. Olson's going to turn on his hotspot too.
Okay.
It'll be a short-lived
What did we miss?
moment.
Not much. Not
We'll
much.
watch the video.
So
not addressing Rick, not addressing the commenter, but addressing Denise. Let's discuss a little bit let's remind ourselves a little bit of what our agreement was on Facebook. And my recollection is that since we are also citizens of Park Ridge and residents of Park Ridge, as well as board members, it doesn't, at least I let the board know that it would not preclude me from engaging on Facebook and engaging in discussions, even if those discussions centered and were related around to D64. I would just make it, and all of us would make it a very strong point to let people know that we are just speaking as individuals and not as board members or for the board. Otherwise, it would just, at least my opinion on that was that I wasn't going to just be completely prevented from, engaging on Facebook on issues that I would normally engage in if I wasn't a school board member. However, we did make it clear that we would make it clear that we weren't speaking for the board or as a board member, but it's our general opinion as a resident of Park Ridge. If anyone thinks that I'm off on that one, please let me know so that I can readjust my course moving forward.
No, I appreciate what you said, Tom. I think we struggled on the expectations. It wasn't the policy, but the board member expectations we struggled with, and this communications part of it. So, no, I hear you.
I think the one thing we did all 100% agree on, and I think this was at the advice of counsel, is that, so Tony, jump in if I mischaracterize this, but we should not, under any circumstances, be participating as elected officials in closed groups on Facebook, groups in which they are not generally open. Was that not a correct assessment of where we came out on that, Tony?
I'm struggling to recall that.
There was a First Amendment related case that we talked about. So for instance, if it was a closed group that limited access, it was a specific D64 closed group, and it limited access to some people and not others into that closed group. And when I say D64, I mean not administered by the district, but administered by a third party, but specific to D64 issues, that we should not participate in that.
And that would be just one board member individually or multiple board members?
Any board member should not participate in that.
I don't think it would be a good idea if it's about district business, but I probably couldn't cite to a law or statute that would forbid that.
So to recall what Rick,
and maybe you had to help me.
Yeah, to recall what Rick is pointing at, there was some discussion and some, I don't know if it was a law or a recommendation, because it's a closed group and it gets to choose who's in it and who isn't, that there would be some sort of fine line that a board member would be walking by engaging in a group that potentially could be, you know, not discriminatory but decisionatory on who it allows in to listen.
Right.
I vaguely recall this, but I also recall that the final recommendation was, you know, you might want to try to avoid that, but there really isn't a you know, there really isn't a law out there or a prohibition of engaging there.
Right. And I think that's where we came out, Tony, that it wasn't per se illegal, but we agreed as a board that we would, it's not a best practice for any of us to be in as elected officials on this board to be in any closed groups like at the time, I think the one closed group was the D64 Parents of Special Ed Students, which was closed. It was only by, you know, it was by invite only to be into that group, and that it was not appropriate for board members to be in that group.
Right.
And other board members not, you know, because board, you know, and other parents could or could not be permitted into that group, you know.
Right. And I mean, the downside to that again, and I know, Tom, you make the point very well that you guys are citizens and community members, but also people look at you as board members. And if the rest of you aren't included, and you are, you could be perceived as speaking on behalf of the board, even though the rest of the board isn't even allowed into the group.
Right. Right. So I don't think there was a legal prohibition. I think we said it was a best practice for us not to do that. I don't recall whether we put that specifically into the policy itself and separated out these closed groups versus others. But I recall that conversation a year and a half ago or so when this board got seated. So that to me was a separate issue of just more generally whether you participate in Facebook. If you go on, you know, Park Ridge Concerned Homeowners or whatever, and somebody asks a D64 question and you jump on, that's a different question to me. Well, actually it's not, because it's kind of the same question because that group's closed too, right? That's by invite only, or you have to be permitted into that group. Although it's not a D64 specific group. Is that any different materially, Tony, from a specifically D64 focused group?
I mean, a D64 focus group, again, a closed group, and some of you may be more familiar with Facebook than I am. But my understanding is it is, you can't get in there at all. There's no way you're going to access or see that. When you're friends with people on Facebook, and maybe Tom, you can help me out here more. Obviously that stuff could get shared, pushed around. And unless you have certain privacy settings, that could be, you know, more public.
Right. Well, there's three different kinds, Tony. There's the you know, like totally public. Then there's a closed group, but you can see that it's there, but you just can't get access to it unless you're permitted to have access to it. And then the third is, which there are a couple in this town, where they are completely closed. They're not even allowed to be seen by anybody unless they're given an invitation to come in that group. And just for the record, there are people out in the community who feed, you know, elected officials stuff on those closed groups. So just so you all know.
Yeah, and you get, this is decisions for the board to make on their own. Obviously, there aren't a lot of laws unless there's three or more of you discussing in a group yourselves. But again, I've already articulated what the concerns are, as, you know, when do you have your board member hat on and when is it off?
Exactly. So again, I'm not suggesting that either a violation occurred as a result of what happened the last time around, or that frankly they were even inappropriate. I'm just saying that it put the board in an awkward spot, it put the board president, but it also put the board in an awkward spot when individuals were responding to messages that were being directed to the board as a whole, because it made it look, you know, maybe that some board members were more attentive than others, or frankly that some board members were even willing to address the issue versus others that weren't. So I don't know where we go from here with that, other than to suggest that we send it back to policy and we see if there's some changes we want to make to that policy or not. Maybe we don't.
That's what I was thinking too. It does make sense that that would be the next step.
So,
I agree. That's fine. We'll discuss it at the next meeting, which
yeah,
has
when I
yet
was
to
going
be
to say, when is
scheduled.
your,
Right. We didn't
it,
schedule it yet.
okay, but it's coming. Is it a December meeting or November meeting that when you guys will have the next one?
It usually comes when a new press release comes, and we
So
haven't
it's
had
timed
one
with
yet.
that. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, your call when you guys want to address that. Bless you. Bless you.
So Rick, are you thinking you'd want the policy committee to meet before our next board meeting?
I don't know.
Are you kind of thinking that?
Carol and Rebecca, what do you guys think? Do you want to meet before? I mean, do you want to have a special policy meeting just for that issue and come back in December with a recommendation to the board of, of change, not change, whatever?
I'll leave that up to Eric with the Thanksgiving holiday coming up. So
Right, because usually the administration, reviews the press policies first, and then.
But in this case, it's not. Yeah, I was going to say there's no press
Right.
policy at issue. We're talking about a
Exactly.
board policy specifically that we'd be proposing to change, which you can do at any time.
Yeah, and I'm perfectly fine to meet.
All right. Well, I'll leave it up to you guys. I know it's on the agenda. Where did I put my agenda right now? Our next board meeting is the 10th.
December 10th. Yep.
Yeah. So I know with Thanksgiving holiday, not that any of us are going to be really doing that this year, but to the extent that it does exist, that's going to be kind of in the middle of that. So I'll leave it up to you guys as to whether you think you can get something done, or have a meeting before the 10th.
Okay.
And we can go from there. So, okay. All right, Dr. Olson, anything else on yours?
No, I was just going to say that's all I had.
Okay. Any new business from the board? Okay.
Rick, I know, were we
go
going to talk about, Eric, some mid-year evaluation next board meeting?
So he and I talked about it. Was it this morning, Eric, or yesterday? I can't even remember. My days all flow together right now. So this is the mid of the mid. I think that's what they call it in Emerson and Lincoln, right? Isn't it when you're in 7th grade and it's the middle of the mid? So this is the mid of the mid for him. So this is not his mid-year evaluation. His mid-year evaluation is going to take place in January, February, like late January or February. This is the mid of the mid right now, which is why he sent us some notes recently about that. And then the discussion was going to be where we were going to do a mid-year evaluation, do sort of a check on where he is on the mileposts of the goals that we put forth for this year, and then discuss contract renewal at that time. So I think Eric or Tony, per the contract, I think that's the time frame, right? Late January, early February when we would do that. So we'll probably look to Eric to give us some written feedback or written information prior to that, a few weeks prior to that, so the board can then formally do the mid-year, in closed session with him in it, right? And then we can have a separate, close without Eric in the room. Tony, is that normally how we would go about doing that? Okay.
Yes.
Denise, does that make sense? Okay. So that doesn't preclude anybody. I know Eric sent some comments to all of us. If anybody wants to have individual conversations with Eric, obviously, by all means, do that. Or if the board wants to have a conversation, we're going to have to do it in closed. But if we do want to have one at the next meeting, we can certainly do it if anyone wants to talk specifically about stuff. But the formal mid-year will be in the late January, early February timeframe. And depending on, we may want to call a special meeting just for that, just because we'll probably have two parts of that, one with Eric and one without. So we can see what the schedule and what everything's going on at that point, COVID wise, and how we want to handle it. But does that sound good for everybody? Okay, cool. Any other new business? All right, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, Tom, I'll take yours as the second. How's that? Fred, you had the motion. Tom had the second. Roll call vote, please.
Biaggi,
Yes.
Pearl,
Yes.
Sotos,
Yes.
Salas, yes. Little,
yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Miles,
Yes.
9:49 p.m. Motion carries.
Okay, we're all adjourned. Thanks.